There are nights when nothing specific is wrong. No crisis, no disaster, no clear problem to solve. Just this quiet sense that something feels off. You can't name it, you can't fix it, and tonight you don't have to. If you've been searching for words to describe this feeling, you're not alone. If you found yourself here tonight looking for permission to rest, without having all the answers, you're in the right place. And if this resonates with you, consider subscribing. There's more quiet understanding waiting for you here. Feeling off doesn't mean something is broken. It doesn't mean you've done something wrong or missed something important. It means you're human. It means your system is speaking in a language older than words, a language of sensations, of subtle shifts, of gentle warnings that don't always come with explanations. And here's what matters most. You don't need to understand this feeling to allow yourself to rest. You don't need to solve it, diagnose it, or make it make sense. You can simply let it be here in this quiet space while you breathe and settle and allow the night to hold you. Because some feelings aren't problems. They're just passages. And this one will pass too. Your body has been keeping records since long before you learned to think in words. It tracks patterns. It notices shifts. It registers tiny changes in temperature, rhythm, energy, and tone that your conscious mind hasn't even begun to process. And sometimes it speaks first. That vague sense of unease you feel right now, that quiet discomfort that seems to have no source, isn't confusion. It's communication. Your body is telling you something it noticed before your thoughts caught up. Maybe it's fatigue you haven't acknowledged. Maybe it's tension you've been carrying without realizing. Maybe it's the residue of 100 small moments that individually seemed fine, but collectively left a mark. The mind wants explanations. It wants neat stories with clear beginnings and satisfying endings. But the body doesn't work that way. The body works in sensations, in whispers, in feelings that float just beneath the surface of awareness. And when everything feels off, it's often because your body has been trying to get your attention for a while, gently at first, then more insistently, and you've been too busy thinking to notice. This is not a failure. This is design. The body is designed to feel before it understands. It's designed to sense danger, discomfort, or misalignment long before the conscious mind has enough information to form a conclusion. In evolutionary terms, this kept us alive. The ancestors who waited until they fully understood why something felt wrong were the ones who didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. The ones who listened to that quiet inner signal, who felt the wrongness before they could name it, those were the ones who moved, who adjusted, who lived. You carry that same system, that same ancient wisdom that doesn't need words to know. And right now, it's telling you something needs attention. Not necessarily action, not necessarily change, just attention. The mistake we make in modern life is assuming that every signal requires an immediate response, that every feeling of off must be investigated, analyzed, and resolved before we can rest. But that's not what the body is asking for. The body isn't demanding that you fix everything tonight. It's not insisting that you identify the exact source of this discomfort or create a detailed plan to address it. It's simply saying, I noticed something. I'm letting you know. And now, I need you to slow down enough to hear me. That's all. When you feel this way, when everything seems slightly wrong in ways you can't quite articulate, You're not broken. You're not malfunctioning. You're experiencing one of the most fundamental aspects of being alive, the capacity to sense what you haven't yet understood. And here's the gentle truth that might help you rest tonight. You don't have to understand it right now. You don't have to figure out exactly what your body is trying to tell you, or why it's speaking up now, or what you're supposed to do about it. You can simply acknowledge that the signal is there, that something in you is paying attention to something else in you. And that's enough for tonight, because the body doesn't just know before the mind, it also knows how to wait. It knows that not everything needs to be resolved in the moment it's noticed. It knows that sometimes the wisest response to a vague feeling of wrongness is simply to rest, to create space, to stop pushing long enough for the deeper wisdom to surface in its own time. Your body has carried you through every difficult moment of your life so far. Every loss, every transition, every period of uncertainty and change. It has navigated complexity you didn't consciously understand. It has made adjustments you never knew were happening. It has kept you breathing, kept your heart beating, kept the essential processes running, even when your mind was completely occupied elsewhere. It knows what it's doing. And when it says, something feels off, it's not asking you to panic. It's not demanding immediate solutions. It's inviting you to listen, to pause, to create a little space between the doing and the being. That's what tonight can be. Not a night of figuring everything out. Not a night of forcing clarity where there isn't any. Just a night of listening to the quiet voice that speaks in feelings rather than words. The voice that's been with you since before you learned to doubt it. The feeling of off is not a warning that you've gone wrong. It's a sign that part of you is still paying attention, still caring, still engaged with your own well-being, enough to notice when something shifts. There's a kind of tiredness that doesn't announce itself clearly. It doesn't come with obvious signs like yawning or heavy eyelids. It doesn't necessarily make you want to sleep. Instead, it changes the way everything looks. When you're carrying accumulated fatigue, weeks or months or years of not quite enough rest of giving, just a little more than you had of staying alert and functional through things that required enormous energy, the world itself begins to feel different. Colors seem slightly muted. Sounds feel a bit too sharp. Simple tasks that used to feel easy now feel heavy in ways you can't quite explain. Nothing has actually changed about the world. The tasks are the same. The responsibilities are the same. The relationships are the same. But your capacity to meet them has quietly diminished, and that changes everything. This is what accumulated fatigue does. It doesn't make you collapse. It makes you feel like you're walking through water. Everything takes more effort. Everything feels slightly harder than it should. And worst of all, you can't quite figure out why. Because the fatigue didn't arrive yesterday. It's been building slowly, so gradually, that you didn't notice each small depletion. You just kept going, kept managing, kept handling what needed to be handled. Until one day, maybe today, you realize that everything feels wrong in a way you can't name. Not broken, not terrible, just off. And here's what's actually happening. You're not seeing the world clearly right now. You're seeing it through a lens of depletion. Research in cognitive psychology shows that fatigue doesn't just make us physically slower, it fundamentally changes how we process information. When we're depleted, we perceive threats more easily than opportunities. We notice problems more readily than solutions. We feel the weight of things more acutely than their lightness. This isn't pessimism. This isn't depression. This is biology. A tired brain is a brain trying to conserve resources. And one way it does that is by making everything seem harder, heavier, more problematic, so that you'll finally stop and rest. It's trying to protect you. It's just not very good at explaining itself. Think about the last time you got genuinely good rest. Not just sleep, but true restoration. Maybe it was a vacation or a weekend where you had no obligations, or even just a single evening where you didn't have to be anything for anyone. Do you remember how different things felt afterward? How problems that seemed insurmountable suddenly had obvious solutions? How tasks that felt overwhelming suddenly seemed manageable? The circumstances didn't change. The problems were the same, but you changed. Your capacity returned, and with it, your perception shifted. That's the lens of fatigue being lifted. Right now, you might be looking at your life through that distorted lens and believing what you see is accurate. Believing that things really are as heavy as they feel, that the distance between where you are and where you want to be really is as vast as it seems. But it's not. The fatigue is lying to you not maliciously, but protectively. It's making things look worse than they are, so that you'll finally give yourself permission to stop trying so hard. And here's the part that's hardest to accept. You might not be able to see this clearly until after you rest. You might not be able to recognize how depleted you are while you're still in it. The fatigue itself clouds your ability to assess your own state. This is why so many people reach the point of feeling completely off without understanding why. They look at their lives and think, nothing's really that bad. Why do I feel like this? They're measuring their circumstances, which might genuinely be fine, while ignoring their capacity, which has been quietly draining for far too long. You can have a perfectly manageable life and still feel overwhelmed if you're trying to manage it with an empty tank. And the cruelest part is that when you're this tired, you often lose the ability to recognize rest as a legitimate solution. You think you need to figure something out, change something, fix something. The idea of simply resting feels too simple, too passive, like giving up. But rest isn't giving up. Rest is the way the system restores accurate perception. It's how you get back to seeing things as they actually are, rather than through the distorted lens of depletion. When you're running on accumulated fatigue, small inconveniences feel like disasters. Minor setbacks feel like proof that everything is falling apart. Normal human limitations feel like personal failures. None of this is true. It's all just the fatigue talking. Your life hasn't gotten worse. Your capacity to hold it has temporarily diminished. And capacity can be restored. It always can. But not through thinking, not through planning, not through trying harder or figuring it out. Only through rest. Real rest. The kind that doesn't demand anything from you. Tonight, you don't need to assess whether your life is actually as hard as it feels. You don't need to determine whether your feelings are justified or whether you're being dramatic. You just need to acknowledge that you've been running for a long time, that you've been carrying things visible and invisible that required strength, and that right now what you're experiencing might not be reality showing its true face. It might just be fatigue asking finally to be heard. We're taught to look for reasons. When something feels wrong, we're supposed to identify what went wrong. When we feel bad, we're supposed to find out why. This works beautifully for simple problems. The car won't start, dead battery. The milk tastes sour, it expired. The relationship feels tense, we had an argument. Cause and effect, clear and traceable. But emotional states don't always work this way. Sometimes you feel off and there's no single reason, no clear event, no obvious trigger. Instead, there are 100 small things, tiny accumulations, moments that individually seemed fine, but collectively created a weight you're now carrying without even realizing it. This is emotional overload. And it's one of the most misunderstood experiences in human life. We treat it like it should make sense, like we should be able to point to something and say, "That's why I feel this way." But emotional overload doesn't come from one thing. It comes from everything. It comes from the news story you read 3 weeks ago that quietly disturbed you but seemed too small to mention. The conversation with your sister that ended fine but left you feeling vaguely unsettled. The reminder that you're aging and time is passing and certain dreams are becoming less likely. It comes from the small disappointments you didn't acknowledge because they seemed too trivial to matter. The little betrayals you forgave but didn't actually process. The moments of loneliness you pushed past because there was still more to do. None of these things by themselves would be enough to explain why everything feels off tonight. But together, they create a kind of ambient pressure, a background weight that affects everything without being identifiable as any particular thing. And because we expect feelings to have clear causes, we often make one of two mistakes when we experience this. The first mistake is to pick something arbitrary and decide that's the cause. We blame our job, our relationship, our body, our choices, not because these things are actually the problem, but because we need something to point to, something to fix. This rarely helps, because even when we address the thing we've identified, the feeling doesn't go away. We change jobs and still feel heavy. We improve the relationship and still feel disconnected. That's because we were never addressing the actual source. We were just picking the most visible target. The second mistake is even more painful. We decide that if we can't find a clear reason for feeling this way, then we must be the problem. We tell ourselves we're being dramatic. We're ungrateful. We're weak or broken or wrong for feeling off when nothing specifically bad has happened. But this isn't weakness. This is just how human nervous systems work when they're holding too much for too long. Research in psychology shows that our emotional systems aren't designed to process everything in real time. We're designed to handle acute stresses, immediate threats that require immediate responses. But modern life doesn't work that way. Modern life is a constant stream of small stressors, minor concerns, background anxieties, and subtle disappointments that never rise to the level of crisis, but also never fully resolve. And the nervous system doesn't know what to do with that. It's like a computer with too many programs running in the background. Each individual program might be fine, but collectively they slow everything down until the whole system feels sluggish and unresponsive. That's what you might be experiencing right now. Not one big problem, just too many small ones, all running simultaneously, all quietly demanding a little bit of your energy and attention. And here's the part that makes this particularly hard. You can't solve this by addressing any single thing. You can't think your way out of it. You can't identify the one cause and eliminate it. You can't make a list and check things off until the feeling goes away, because the feeling isn't coming from one thing, It's coming from the accumulation of everything. And the only real solution to accumulation is release, not resolution release. You don't need to solve each individual thing. You don't need to process every small disappointment or address every minor concern. You just need to create space for the pressure to dissipate. This happens through rest, through time, through moments where you're not adding anything new to the pile. It happens when you stop expecting yourself to trace every feeling back to its source, and instead, simply acknowledge, I'm carrying a lot right now. More than I realized. Some of what you're carrying is visible. The tasks, the responsibilities, the roles you fill. But some of it is invisible. The emotional residue of 1,000 small moments that affected you more than you knew. You don't need to catalogue it all. You don't need to understand each piece or determine which ones matter most. You just need to acknowledge that it's there, that the weight is real even if you can't point to a single source. Tonight, you don't need to find the reason you feel off. You don't need one clear answer. You just need to know that sometimes feeling this way is simply what happens when you've been human for a while, experiencing life in all its complexity, carrying what needed carrying. And that's reason enough to rest. There's a reason everything feels heavier after dark. It's not your imagination. It's not weakness. It's not even really about what you're thinking. It's physiology. When the sun goes down, your body begins a series of quiet shifts that have been happening since long before electric lights existed. Your cortisol levels drop. Your melatonin rises. Your core temperature begins its nightly descent. And in that shifting landscape, something interesting happens to the way you perceive discomfort. Things that felt manageable during the day suddenly feel overwhelming. Worries that seem distant at noon press close at midnight. That vague sense of something being off, the one you barely noticed this morning, now fills the entire room. Nothing has actually changed. The circumstances are the same. The problems are the same. But nighttime has turned up the volume on everything your daytime mind was able to keep quiet. This isn't a flaw in your thinking. This is ancient biology doing exactly what it was designed to do. For most of human history, nighttime was dangerous. Darkness meant vulnerability. It meant reduced visibility, reduced ability to assess threats, reduced capacity to respond. So your nervous system learned to be more alert at night, more vigilant, more sensitive to anything that might signal danger. And even though you're safe in your bed, even though there are no predators lurking outside your door, your body doesn't entirely know that. It still carries those old instructions: when it's dark, pay closer attention. Notice more, feel more intensely. That subtle anxiety you felt earlier, at night it becomes impossible to ignore. That mild sadness from the afternoon after dark, it feels like grief. That quiet sense that something isn't quite right. In the darkness, it feels like certainty that something is very wrong. But here's what's actually happening. The feeling isn't getting bigger. Your ability to maintain perspective is getting smaller. During the day, you have distractions. Sunlight, activity, the presence of other people, a sense of forward momentum. All of these things help regulate your nervous system. They help keep uncomfortable feelings in proportion. But at night, those buffers fall away. The distractions disappear. The activity stops. You're alone with yourself and whatever you've been carrying. And suddenly, the things that seemed small loom large. This is why you can go to bed feeling generally fine and wake up at 3 in the morning convinced that everything in your life is falling apart. Nothing changed between bedtime and 3 a.m. except your neurochemistry, except the absence of daylight, except the quiet that allows every small concern to echo louder. Research in circadian neuroscience confirms this emotional regulation is significantly harder at night. The parts of your brain responsible for keeping things in perspective, the prefrontal cortex primarily, are less active. Meanwhile, the parts responsible for detecting threat and processing negative emotions, the amygdala, become more active. Your brain literally shifts into a different mode after dark, one that's more sensitive, more reactive, more prone to catastrophizing. This is why the same problem that felt solvable at 2 in the afternoon can feel insurmountable at 2 in the morning. Not because the problem changed, because your brain's ability to assess it accurately changed. And here's the crucial thing to understand. You cannot think your way out of this. You cannot use logic to convince yourself that the nighttime version of your worries is exaggerated, because the part of your brain that would normally help you maintain that perspective is temporarily offline. Trying to reason with nighttime anxiety is like trying to have a rational conversation with someone who's had too much to drink. The hardware for rational conversation isn't fully available, so the feelings keep looping, the thoughts keep spiraling, and you lie there wondering why you can't just calm down, why you can't just see things clearly, why you can't just feel the way you felt 12 hours ago when everything seemed fine. But you're asking your nighttime brain to function like your daytime brain, and it can't. It's not designed to. What it is designed to do is keep you safe through the vulnerable hours of darkness. And it does that by being extra sensitive, extra alert, extra responsive to anything that might be wrong. The problem is, in modern life, this sensitivity doesn't encounter actual predators. It encounters your thoughts, your memories, your worries about tomorrow, or regrets about yesterday. And it treats all of those as potential threats, as things that need to be solved right now in the middle of the night before you can rest. But they don't. They really don't. The thought that feels so urgent at midnight will still be there in the morning, and in the morning it will feel different, smaller, more manageable, more like something you can actually work with, instead of something that's working on you. This happens every single time. Every single night that you've lain awake feeling terrible morning eventually came and brought a different perspective with it. Not because you figured anything out, not because you solved the problem, but because the sun came up and your brain chemistry shifted back into daytime mode. That same thing will happen tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night after. The darkness amplifies, the daylight clarifies. This is just how the system works. So when everything feels overwhelming right now, when that subtle discomfort from earlier has grown into something that feels impossible to bear, you don't need to fight it. You don't need to convince yourself it's not real, or tell yourself to calm down, or wonder why you're being so dramatic. You can simply recognize this is nighttime doing what nighttime does, making small things feel large, making distant things feel close, making the manageable feel impossible. And in the morning, not because you earned it or figured it out, but simply because morning comes, this will shift. The feeling that's overwhelming you right now will still exist, but it will exist in proportion again. It will be something you can hold instead of something that's holding you. You've experienced this cycle hundreds of times before. You just forget in the middle of the night that it's a cycle. You forget that the nighttime lens is temporary, that the amplification is biological, not factual. So tonight, you don't have to believe what the darkness is telling you. You don't have to solve what feels unsolvable or understand what feels incomprehensible. You can just wait, rest. Let the night do what it does, knowing that morning will do what it does too. Your brain hates uncertainty. It's hardwired to find patterns, identify causes, create explanations for everything it encounters. This served us well for most of human history. The ancestor who noticed that certain berries made people sick, that certain sounds meant predators nearby, that certain clouds meant rain was coming, that ancestor survived. The one who shrugged at ambiguity didn't. So you inherited a brain that constantly searches for meaning, that takes vague feelings and tries to turn them into clear narratives. And when you feel off, when something is wrong, but you can't quite say what your brain goes into overdrive trying to explain it. It starts scanning your life for problems. It reviews recent conversations looking for signs of conflict. It examines your choices searching for mistakes. It projects into the future imagining disasters. And usually, it finds something. Because if you look hard enough at any life, you can always find something that could be better, something that might be wrong, something that could potentially become a problem. Your brain grabs onto that thing and says, "There. That's why you feel this way. That's the source." And suddenly, you have a story. Maybe the story is that you're falling behind at work. Maybe it's that your relationship is deteriorating. Maybe it's that you made a wrong choice 5 years ago, and you're still paying for it. The specific story doesn't matter. What matters is that your brain has found a narrative that seems to explain the vague discomfort you're experiencing. And here's the problem. The story isn't necessarily true. Your brain didn't find the actual cause of your discomfort. It found something plausible, something that fits, something that gives the uncomfortable feeling a shape and a name. But plausibility isn't the same as accuracy. You might be feeling off because you're tired, or because you're fighting off a virus, or because the seasons are changing, or because you're processing something your conscious mind hasn't even registered yet. But your brain doesn't like those explanations. They're too vague, too unsatisfying, too hard to do anything about. So instead, it gives you a story about your job, or your relationship, or your life choices. Something concrete, something you can think about, something you can potentially fix. And once it gives you that story, something dangerous happens. You start to believe it. You start treating the story as fact. You start making decisions based on it. You start feeling emotions about the narrative your brain constructed rather than about what's actually happening. This is how people end their relationships during periods of depression. How they quit jobs during burnout. How they make major life changes in response to feelings that were never really about the thing they're changing. The feeling of off was real, but the explanation the brain provided wasn't. And by the time they realize that, by the time the feeling passes and they can see clearly again, the damage is done. This happens because we trust our thoughts too much. We assume that if our brain is telling us something with such conviction, it must be true. But conviction isn't evidence. Your brain can be absolutely certain about something that's completely wrong. It does this all the time. Every optical illusion is proof of this. Every time you've been sure you left your keys somewhere and they turned out to be somewhere else completely. Your brain constructs reality based on incomplete information. It fills in gaps, it makes assumptions, It creates coherent narratives out of fragmentary evidence. And most of the time this works fine. But when you're feeling off, when your emotional state is already disrupted, the narratives your brain constructs become less reliable. They're colored by your current state, filtered through fatigue or stress or accumulated tension. A thought that arises during a period of feeling off is not the same as a thought that arises during a period of clarity, even if it sounds exactly the same. The content might be identical, but the meaning is different. When you're feeling clear and grounded, the thought, "I should make a change in my life," might be genuine wisdom arising from careful reflection. When you're feeling off, that exact same thought might just be your brain trying to explain a discomfort that has nothing to do with whether or not you need to make changes. So, how do you know the difference? Usually, you can't. Not in the moment. That's the whole problem. In the moment, both thoughts feel true. Both feel important. Both feel like they're coming from a place of genuine insight. The only way to know the difference is time and space, and the willingness to not immediately trust every narrative your brain provides. This doesn't mean your thoughts are all wrong. It doesn't mean you should never listen to yourself. It just means that when you're already feeling off, when things already feel misaligned, the stories your brain tells about why are less trustworthy than usual. They're hypotheses, not conclusions. Possibilities, not facts. And they deserve to be held lightly, questioned gently, given time to prove themselves before you act on them. Because here's what often happens. You feel off for reasons you don't understand. Your brain creates a story to explain it. You believe the story. You take action based on the story. And then the original feeling passes. Because it was always going to pass. Because it was never really about the story. And you're left dealing with the consequences of decisions you made while you weren't seeing clearly. This is one of the most painful patterns in human life. And it's almost entirely avoidable if you can learn to recognize when your brain is searching for meaning versus when it's actually found it. The sign that your brain is searching rather than finding is usually the urgency, the insistence, the way the thoughts keep circling back, demanding attention, requiring resolution right now. Real insight doesn't usually feel that way. Real insight often feels quiet, certain but not urgent, clear but not demanding. The frantic quality of thought, the spiraling nature of it, the way it won't let you rest until you figure it out. That's usually a sign that your brain is in search mode, not discovery mode. It's trying to solve the discomfort by explaining it, and it will create increasingly elaborate explanations if you let it. But you don't have to let it. You can notice the thoughts without believing them. You can acknowledge the stories without acting on them. You can say gently, "I see that my brain is trying to make sense of this feeling. It's doing what it's designed to do. But I don't have to trust every explanation it provides. Tonight, the story your mind is telling you about why you feel this way might be true, or it might just be your brain trying to give shape to something shapeless. Either way, you don't need to know right now. You don't need to solve it, or believe it, or act on it. You can just let it be there, like background noise while you rest. Your nervous system has one primary job: keep you alive. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is negotiable. But survival, that's non-negotiable. And your nervous system takes this job very seriously. So seriously that it has developed an extremely sensitive alarm system designed to alert you to potential threats, long before they become actual dangers. This alarm system has kept humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years. It's the reason you feel uneasy in dark parking lots, the reason you tense up when someone's tone shifts in a conversation, the reason you wake up alert when you hear an unfamiliar sound in the night. It's brilliant at its job. Except for one problem: it can't always tell the difference between actual danger and discomfort. To your nervous system, feeling off and being unsafe often register the same way. Both create similar sensations in your body. Both trigger similar responses. Both feel like something is wrong that needs to be addressed immediately. But they're not the same thing, not even close. Being unsafe means there's an actual threat to your well-being, something that could harm you, something that requires action right now. Feeling off means your system is out of balance. Something is not quite right. Something deserves attention eventually. The difference is crucial. But your nervous system frequently misses it. It experiences the subtle discomfort of feeling off and interprets it as a warning signal. Your heart rate increases slightly. Your breathing becomes a bit more shallow. Your muscles hold a little more tension. And these physical changes create a feedback loop. The more your body responds as if there's danger, the more convinced your mind becomes that there must be danger somewhere. So you start scanning for threats, looking for what's wrong, trying to identify the source of the alarm. And because you're looking for danger, you find it. Not actual danger, but things that could potentially become problems. Things that might go wrong. Things that feel uncertain or unstable. Your brain takes these possibilities and treats them as probabilities, then as certainties. And suddenly, you're lying in bed feeling completely unsafe, even though nothing in your immediate environment has actually changed. The house is the same. The people in your life are the same. Your actual circumstances are the same. But your nervous system is screaming that something is wrong. And it's very hard to not believe it. This is one of the cruelest tricks your biology plays on you. It makes discomfort feel like danger. It makes the need for rest feel like the need to run. And because the sensation is so convincing, you often respond to feeling off the same way you'd respond to being unsafe, by going into problem-solving mode, by trying to identify and eliminate the threat. But there is no threat. There's just depletion, or accumulated stress, or the simple reality that you've been going for a long time and your system needs to recalibrate. None of these things are dangerous. None of them require immediate action, but they all create the same uncomfortable sensations that actual danger creates. And your nervous system doing its job sounds the alarm anyway. Neuroscience research shows that the part of your brain responsible for threat detection, the amygdala, doesn't distinguish well between different types of distress. Physical pain, emotional pain, social rejection, uncertainty, fatigue, all of these can trigger the same threat response. Your brain treats the discomfort of feeling off the same way it treats the fear of being attacked. It releases the same stress hormones. It activates the same defensive systems. And it does this because evolutionarily it was better to be safe than sorry. Better to run from 100 false alarms than to miss the one real threat. But in modern life, this creates a problem. Because most of what triggers your alarm system isn't actually dangerous. It's just uncomfortable, just uncertain, just unfamiliar. And when you respond to every uncomfortable feeling as if it's a genuine threat you never get to rest. You're always in defense mode, always trying to fix something, always convinced that you're not safe until you figure out what's wrong and make it right. But right now, in this moment, you are actually safe. Your heart is beating. You're breathing. You have shelter. You're not in immediate danger. The feeling of unsafety is real. Your nervous system genuinely believes something is wrong. But the feeling is not an accurate reflection of your current reality. It's a reflection of an overactive alarm system, a threat detection mechanism that's been running on high alert for too long and has started seeing threats everywhere. And here's what you need to know. You can feel unsafe and still be safe. These two things can coexist. Your body can be screaming that something is wrong, while your actual circumstances remain stable. This doesn't mean your feelings don't matter. They absolutely do. They're real. They're valid. They deserve acknowledgement. But they're not always telling you the truth about what's happening right now. Sometimes they're telling you the truth about what happened before, about old fears that haven't resolved, about threats that were real once but aren't real now. Sometimes they're telling you that you're exhausted and need rest, but using the language of danger because that's the only language your alarm system knows. And sometimes they're just misfiring, responding to internal discomfort as if it were external threat. The work isn't to make the feeling go away. The work is to gently separate the feeling from the facts. To say, I notice I feel unsafe. And also, I am actually safe right now. Both things can be true. And holding both allows you to respond to what you're actually experiencing rather than to what your alarm system thinks you're experiencing. Tonight, you might feel like something is terribly wrong. Your body might be insisting that you're not safe, that you need to figure something out, that you can't rest until you do. But you can check, are you in actual danger right now in this moment? And if the answer is no, if you're simply uncomfortable, uncertain, or off balance, then you are safe enough to rest. The feeling will pass, the alarm will quiet, and you will still be here, still breathing, still safe. There's a myth we've all absorbed quietly without even noticing. The myth that life is supposed to feel right, aligned, in rhythm. That when things are going well, everything clicks into place. The pieces fit. The days flow. You wake up feeling clear about who you are and where you're going. And when that doesn't happen, when things feel slightly off, slightly out of sync, we assume something has gone wrong. But nothing has gone wrong. Life isn't a straight line. It isn't a steady state. It's not designed to feel perfectly aligned all the time. It's designed to oscillate, to shift, to move through periods of clarity and periods of confusion, periods of ease and periods of friction, periods where everything makes sense and periods where nothing quite does. This isn't failure. This is function. Every living system operates this way. Your heartbeat isn't steady. It varies with each breath, each movement, each thought. Your body temperature fluctuates throughout the day. Your energy rises and falls in natural cycles. Even your cells are constantly dying and regenerating, never maintaining the same exact configuration for more than a moment. Life is rhythm, not stability. Movement, not fixedness. And you are a living system, which means you too are designed to move through phases, to oscillate, to shift between states. Sometimes you feel aligned with your life, your values match your actions, your energy matches your ambitions, your inner sense of self matches how you're showing up in the world. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's a gap, a dissonance, a feeling that you're slightly out of step with yourself. This gap isn't a sign that you've lost your way. It's a sign that you're in a different phase of the natural cycle. Think about the seasons. Winter doesn't mean spring has failed. It just means the earth is in a different part of its rhythm. Nothing is broken when the trees are bare. Nothing needs fixing when the ground is frozen. It's just winter. And winter has its own purpose, its own necessity, its own gifts, even though it doesn't feel like spring. You have seasons too, periods where everything grows easily, where you feel aligned and clear and in flow, and periods where things feel dormant, where you're not sure what you're doing or why, where the path that seemed so clear a few months ago now feels unclear. This is disalignment. And it's not only normal, it's necessary, because you can't grow in the same direction forever. At some point, you need to pause, recalibrate, let go of what was working, so something new can emerge. And that transition, that space between what was and what will be, always feels off. It feels like you've lost the rhythm, lost the thread, lost your sense of direction. But you haven't lost anything. You're just in the space between notes, the pause between breaths, the transition between seasons. And that space is supposed to feel uncertain. It's supposed to feel like you're not quite anywhere. Because you're not. You're in motion, moving from one state to another. Research in developmental psychology confirms this growth doesn't happen linearly. It happens in stages with transition periods between each stage. And those transition periods are almost always uncomfortable. They're characterized by confusion, doubt, and a sense that something is off. Not because anything is actually wrong, but because the old way of being doesn't fit anymore and the new way hasn't fully formed yet. You're between identities, between versions of yourself. And your brain, which likes things to be clear and defined, hates this. It interprets the lack of clarity as a problem. But the lack of clarity is the process. The uncertainty, it's the growth happening in real time. You can't rush it. You can't force it into clarity before it's ready. You can only move through it. Trust that the disalignment is temporary, that the rhythm will return. Because it always does. Every time you felt this way before, every time things felt off, felt wrong, felt like you'd somehow gotten out of sync with your own life, the alignment eventually returned. Not because you forced it, not because you figured it out, or fixed something, or made better decisions, but because that's what living systems do. They oscillate, they move out of balance, and then naturally return to it, like breathing. You inhale, you exhale. You can't stay in either state. You have to move between them. And the space between that moment of transition where you're neither breathing in nor breathing out, that's not a problem. That's just part of the rhythm. Right now, you might be in that transitional space, between breaths, between seasons, between versions of yourself. And it feels uncomfortable because transition always does. Your mind wants to know where you're going. It wants a plan, a timeline, a clear sense of what comes next. But life doesn't always provide that. Sometimes it just provides the discomfort of not knowing, the uncertainty of being in process. And your job isn't to eliminate that discomfort. It's to recognize it for what it is, a natural part of being alive. You're not off track. You're not broken. You haven't made wrong choices or lost your way. You're just in a different part of the cycle. A part that doesn't feel as good as the aligned parts, but a part that's just as necessary. Because if you stayed aligned all the time, you'd never grow. You'd never change. You'd never discover new aspects of yourself or new ways of being in the world. The disalignment is what creates the space for something new to emerge. It's uncomfortable. It's uncertain. It asks you to trust without knowing what you're trusting in. But it's not wrong. It's not a mistake. It's not evidence that something has gone wrong in your life. It's just winter. Just the pause between breaths. Just the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And like all seasons, it will pass. The rhythm will return. The alignment will come back. Not because you earned it or figured it out, but because that's what living systems do. They move through cycles. They oscillate. They return to balance after periods of imbalance. This is built into the design, into your design. So when you feel out of sync with your life, when nothing quite fits the way it used to, when you can't find the rhythm you once had, this doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're alive, moving, growing, changing. And change always begins with disalignment. Tonight, you don't need to force yourself back into rhythm. You don't need to figure out why you feel out of sync or how to fix it. You can simply recognize that you're in a transitional phase, a natural, necessary, temporary phase, and that the alignment will return in its own time, the way spring always follows winter. We've been trained to treat discomfort as a problem. Something hurts, fix it. Something feels wrong, change it. Something isn't working. Figure out why and make it better. This approach works beautifully for certain things. Broken bones need setting. Leaking roofs need repair. Conflicts need resolution. But we've extended this problem-solving mindset to everything, including things that were never problems to begin with, including feelings that don't need fixing. They just need time. When you feel off, your first instinct is probably to do something about it, to figure out what's causing it, to make a change, to take action that will eliminate the discomfort and return you to feeling normal. This instinct makes sense. It's how you've learned to move through the world. Identify problems, solve them, move on. But some feelings aren't problems. They're processes. They're your system working through something, adjusting to something, integrating something. And when you treat a process like a problem, when you try to fix something that just needs to unfold, you often make things worse. You interrupt the natural progression. You add anxiety on top of discomfort. You create urgency around something that was never urgent to begin with. Think about physical healing. When you cut your finger, you don't fix it. You can't. You can clean it, bandage it, protect it. But the actual healing, that happens on its own timeline. Your body knows how to knit skin back together. It knows the sequence of steps, the pace of regeneration, the process of repair. Your job isn't to heal the cut. Your job is to not interfere with the healing that's already happening. Emotional and psychological processes work the same way. When you're processing grief or adjusting to change or integrating new information about yourself or your life, there's a natural sequence that needs to unfold. And that sequence often includes periods of feeling off, feeling disconnected, feeling like something isn't quite right. But that feeling isn't the problem. It's part of the process. It's your system doing its work, reorganizing, recalibrating, finding a new equilibrium. And when you try to fix it, when you try to force yourself to feel better before you're actually ready to feel better, you interrupt that process. You add a layer of judgment. I shouldn't feel this way. Something must be wrong with me. I need to fix this. And suddenly, you're not just dealing with the original discomfort. You're also dealing with the anxiety about the discomfort, the frustration that it hasn't resolved yet, the fear that it never will. None of this helps. All of it interferes. Because the original feeling wasn't asking to be fixed. It was asking to be allowed, to be felt, to move through you in its own time. This is one of the hardest things to learn in a culture that treats every uncomfortable feeling as a problem requiring immediate solution. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is nothing. Not nothing in the sense of ignoring or suppressing or pretending the feeling isn't there, but nothing in the sense of not trying to change it, not trying to make it make sense, not trying to act on it or eliminate it or force it into resolution, just letting it be there, feeling it without doing anything about it. This feels impossibly passive to most people. It feels like giving up, like accepting defeat. But it's not passive at all. It's one of the most active things you can do, because it requires you to resist every impulse to fix, to change, to act. It requires you to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. It requires trust, the deep, difficult trust that some things resolve themselves if you give them time and space. And here's what often happens when you do this: the feeling moves. Not because you did anything, but because feelings by their nature are temporary. They arise, they peak, they fade. This is what feelings do when you let them. When you don't grab onto them and insist they mean something, or require something, or need to be solved. But when you try to fix them, you freeze them in place. You give them weight and significance they might not actually have. You turn a passing discomfort into a persistent problem. Research in emotion regulation supports this. Trying to suppress or eliminate uncomfortable emotions usually prolongs them, while simply allowing them to be present without judgment, without action, allows them to move through more quickly. This doesn't mean you should never take action. Sometimes action is absolutely necessary, but the time to act is when you have clarity, when you know what needs to be done and why, not when you're just trying to make an uncomfortable feeling go away. Action taken from discomfort rarely leads anywhere useful. It's reactive, not responsive. It's about escaping the feeling rather than addressing the actual situation. And most of the time when you feel off, the situation doesn't actually require action. It requires patience. It requires you to trust that whatever you're feeling right now is part of a larger process that you don't need to control or accelerate. Some feelings are just passing through. They're clouds, not climate. Weather, not destination. And if you can let them be weather temporary, moving, not requiring your intervention, they'll pass much more easily than if you try to hold them, analyze them, fix them. Tonight, you might be feeling the urge to do something about this discomfort, to make a decision, to create a plan, to change something so you don't have to feel this way anymore. But before you do anything, ask yourself, does this actually need action, or does it just need time? Is there something genuinely requiring a response? Or is your system just processing something, adjusting to something, moving through something? And if it's the latter, if this is just a feeling passing through, then the kindest thing you can do is let it pass. Don't grab it, don't feed it, Don't turn it into something bigger than it is. Just notice it's there. Acknowledge that it's uncomfortable and trust that it won't stay forever. Because nothing does. Everything moves. Everything changes. And some of the deepest wisdom you can access is knowing when to act and when to simply wait, when to fix and when to trust that time will do the fixing for you. You're lying here tonight feeling like you're the only one who feels this way, the only one who can't quite get it together, the only one struggling with this vague, indefinable sense that something is off. Everyone else seems fine. They seem to have it figured out. They seem to move through their days with clarity and purpose, while you're here unable to even name what's wrong. But here's what you can't see. Everyone has nights like this. Everyone experiences this same quiet unraveling, this same sense of being slightly lost in their own life. They just don't talk about it. Because we've created a culture where everyone displays their best moments and hides their hardest ones, where people share their victories but not their doubts, their clarity but not their confusion, their joy but not their 3 a.m. Questions about whether they're doing any of this right. So you see everyone's highlight reel and compare it to your behind-the-scenes footage. And of course, you feel alone. Of course, you feel like you're the only one struggling, because you're comparing your internal experience, messy, uncertain, full of doubt, with everyone else's external presentation, polished, confident together. But that presentation isn't the whole story. It's not even most of the story. Behind every confident exterior is a person who has moments of deep uncertainty. Behind every person who seems to have life figured out is someone who regularly questions everything. The difference isn't that some people feel off and others don't. The difference is that some people have learned to hide it better. They've learned to keep moving even when they feel stuck, to keep smiling even when they feel heavy, to keep presenting as fine even when they're anything but. And this creates a terrible isolation. Because when everyone is hiding the same struggle, everyone feels alone in it. You see people at work, at the store, at social gatherings, and they all seem okay. So you assume you're the only one who isn't. But they're making the same assumption about you. They see you going through your day, managing your responsibilities, showing up where you need to show up. And they assume you're fine. They have no idea that you're struggling the same way they are, that you're feeling the same quiet desperation, the same sense of being slightly off-center in your own life. Because you're hiding it too, because that's what we've all learned to do. Research in social psychology calls this pluralistic ignorance, when everyone privately feels one way but believes everyone else feels differently. And it's incredibly common around emotional experiences like this. Almost everyone feels off sometimes, but almost everyone believes they're the only one. The truth is, if you could see inside other people's minds the way you see inside your own, you'd be shocked by how familiar it all feels. The same doubts, the same fears, the same late-night questions, the same sense of not quite measuring up, or not quite understanding what you're doing, or not quite feeling like you have this whole being human thing figured out. It's universal. It's part of the human condition. But it feels deeply personal because you only ever experience your own version of it. You never get to feel someone else's 3 a.m. anxiety. You never get to sit inside their uncertainty. You never get to experience their moments of feeling completely lost. You only see how they show up afterward, after they've pulled themselves together, after they've hidden the struggle and presented the functional version of themselves. And so you think they don't struggle at all. But they do. Everyone does. The person who seems to have the perfect life has nights where they lie awake, wondering if they're wasting it. The person who seems so confident has moments of crushing self-doubt. The person who seems to handle everything with ease has times when it all feels like too much. They just don't broadcast it. They don't put it on display. They keep it private the way you keep yours private. And in that privacy, everyone feels alone. But you're not alone. You've never been alone in this. Every single person you know has felt this way. Every single person you pass on the street has had nights like tonight. Nights where nothing feels quite right, where they can't name what's wrong, but they know something is. Where they lie there wondering if everyone else has figured out something they've missed. This isn't weakness. This isn't failure. This isn't evidence that you're broken or less capable than others. This is just what it means to be human, to have a mind that questions, a heart that feels, a system that sometimes gets overwhelmed. And every other human shares this with you, even if they never say it out loud. The person sitting next to you at work, the friend who always seems to have it together, the family member you admire, the stranger you passed this morning. All of them have felt this. All of them have nights where everything feels off. The isolation you feel right now isn't because you're actually alone in this experience. It's because we've all agreed silently not to talk about it, to keep our struggles private, to present only the parts of ourselves that seem acceptable, functional together. But that agreement serves no one. It just makes everyone feel more isolated. So here's what helps knowing that this feeling doesn't set you apart. It connects you to every person who's ever lain awake at night, feeling exactly what you're feeling right now. To every person who's ever questioned whether they're doing this right, whether they're enough, whether they're the only one who feels this lost sometimes. You're not the only one. You've never been the only one. And tomorrow, when you see people moving through their days looking fine, remember they might be feeling exactly what you're feeling tonight. They might be carrying the same quiet struggle, the same uncertainty, the same sense of being slightly off. They just learn to carry it silently, the way you have. And maybe that's lonely. But maybe it's also comforting, because it means that when you feel this way, you're actually experiencing one of the most universal aspects of being human. You're not alone in feeling alone. You're not isolated in feeling isolated. You're part of the quiet majority who struggles in private while appearing fine in public. And there's a strange kind of belonging in that. There's a voice that shows up when things feel wrong. A voice that says, do something, change something, fix this now. It's urgent, insistent. It makes you feel like you can't rest, can't wait, can't just be with what is until you've done something to make it different. And that voice feels important. It feels like wisdom, like your intuition trying to guide you toward necessary action. But most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's just anxiety, dressed up as productivity, masquerading as insight. When you feel off, your nervous system interprets that feeling as a signal that something needs to change. And it pushes you toward action, any action, because action feels like control. Action feels like you're doing something about the problem. Like you're taking charge instead of being at the mercy of uncomfortable feelings. But feeling off isn't a call to act. It's an invitation to pause, to create space, to wait until you can see clearly before you make decisions that will affect your life. Because decisions made from discomfort rarely serve you well. They're reactive, not considered. They're about escaping the feeling rather than responding to what actually needs attention. You quit the job that was actually fine because you needed to change something, anything. You end the relationship that was actually working because you needed to feel like you were taking control. You make a big move, a big purchase, a big commitment, not because it was right, but because it was different. And different felt like progress. But it wasn't progress. It was just movement. And movement isn't the same as direction. Real change, meaningful, sustainable change, doesn't come from discomfort. It comes from clarity. It comes from understanding what actually needs to shift and why. From seeing the situation clearly enough to know what would genuinely improve it. And you can't access that clarity when you're in the middle of feeling off. Because the feeling itself distorts your perception. It makes everything look more urgent, more broken, more in need of fixing than it actually is. So, when you act from that place, you're acting on distorted information, on a version of reality that's filtered through discomfort. And the changes you make from that place rarely address what actually needed addressing. Instead, they often create new problems, new complications, new things to manage and navigate and eventually feel off about. This is how people end up in cycles of constant change without ever finding the peace they're looking for. They feel off, so they change something. The change creates temporary relief, the feeling of doing something, of not being stuck. But then the feeling returns. Because the feeling was never really about the thing they changed, so they change something else, and something else, and something else. Always moving, never arriving. Always adjusting, never settling. Because they're trying to fix a feeling with action. And feelings don't work that way. Feelings need to be felt, processed, given time and space to move through. They don't need to be acted upon. They need to be witnessed. And here's the paradox. When you give yourself permission to feel off without needing to change anything, the feeling usually resolves faster. When you stop treating it as a problem that requires a solution and start treating it as an experience that requires patience, it moves through more easily. Because you're not adding resistance to it. You're not piling urgency and anxiety and self-judgment on top of the original discomfort. You're just letting it be what it is, a temporary state, a passing phase, something your system is moving through. And when you let it be temporary, it actually becomes temporary. But when you grab onto it and make it mean something, make it evidence that you need to change your life, that you're on the wrong path, that something is fundamentally broken, you give it weight it doesn't deserve. You turn a passing discomfort into a defining narrative. So tonight, when that voice shows up telling you that you need to do something, change something, fix something, pause. Ask yourself, is there actually something that needs immediate attention? Or is this just discomfort trying to disguise itself as urgency? Is there a real problem requiring a real solution? Or is there just a feeling requiring permission to exist? Most of the time, it's the latter. Most of the time, nothing actually needs to change right now, except your relationship to the discomfort you're feeling. Most of the time, the wisest action is non-action, is waiting, is choosing consciously and deliberately not to make big decisions or big changes when you're not seeing clearly. This doesn't mean you ignore genuine problems. It doesn't mean you never take action. It just means you learn to distinguish between the urge to act and the actual need to act. Between the anxiety that wants to do something, anything to escape discomfort, and the clarity that knows what specifically needs to change and why. And the way you learn that distinction is by practicing waiting, by choosing when you feel off to not immediately respond, to sit with it, to feel it, to let it be there without needing to fix it or change it or make it make sense. And usually, after some time, sometimes hours, sometimes days, the urgency fades, the feeling shifts, and you can see more clearly. You can see what, if anything, actually needed addressing, what was real and what was just the discomfort talking. Tonight, you don't need to decide anything. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to take action on any of the thoughts or feelings that are showing up. You can just let them be here, moving through while you rest. Because feeling off is not a call to act. It's an invitation to allow, to be patient with yourself, to trust that clarity will return without you forcing it. Your body has never been in perfect balance. Not once, not even for a moment. This might sound alarming, but it's actually one of the most reassuring truths about being alive. Balance isn't a state you achieve and then maintain. It's not a destination you reach and stay at. Balance in living systems is always temporary, always approximate, always in motion. Your blood sugar rises and falls throughout the day. Your body temperature fluctuates by the hour. Your hormone levels shift with your sleep cycle, your stress levels, your activities. Your heart doesn't beat at a perfectly steady rate. It speeds up when you breathe in, slows down when you breathe out. Even at rest, even in sleep, your body is constantly adjusting, correcting, drifting slightly out of balance and then gently returning. This is called homeostasis. And it's not about staying balanced, it's about constantly rebalancing. Your body is designed to oscillate around a set point, not to hold it perfectly still. Think of a tightrope walker. They're not balanced in the sense of being perfectly still. They're constantly making tiny adjustments, shifting weight, moving arms, correcting lean. The balance is in the constant micro-corrections, not in achieving some fixed, stable position. That's you. That's how your entire system works. And it's not just physical, it's emotional, psychological, mental. You drift out of balance regularly, daily, sometimes hourly. You have moments of feeling grounded, followed by moments of feeling unmoored. Periods of clarity followed by periods of confusion. Times when everything makes sense, followed by times when nothing does. This isn't a problem. This is the system functioning exactly as designed. Because living systems can't hold a fixed state. The moment they do, they're no longer living. Life requires movement, flux, the constant dance of regulation and adjustment. In biological terms, this is called dynamic equilibrium, a state of balance that's maintained through continuous change, not through staying the same. Your body is always responding to new information, new demands, new conditions. It's adjusting your blood pressure based on whether you're sitting or standing, regulating your temperature based on the environment, shifting your energy levels based on what you've eaten and how much you've slept. And sometimes in the process of all these adjustments, you drift further from center than usual. You get tired. You get overwhelmed. Your system gets stretched in multiple directions, trying to respond to competing demands. And that's when you feel off. when the oscillation has swung a bit wider than comfortable, when you're further from your center point than you're used to being. But here's what matters. The system knows how to return. It always does. It's designed to. When your blood sugar drops too low, your body releases hormones to bring it back up. When your temperature rises too high, you sweat to cool down. These corrections happen automatically, without your conscious involvement, without you having to figure them out or force them. Your body has millions of years of evolutionary wisdom built into it. It knows how to regulate itself. And the same is true for your emotional and psychological balance. When you drift too far into anxiety, your system has mechanisms to bring you back toward calm. When you swing too far into numbness, it has ways of re-engaging feeling. The drift is normal. The return is normal. Both are part of how living systems maintain themselves over time. The problem is, we've been taught to see any deviation from center as failure. We think we should always feel balanced, always feel okay. And when we don't, we assume something has gone wrong. But nothing has gone wrong. You're just in the drift phase of the cycle. You've swung out a bit. You're temporarily further from center than you'd like to be. And your system is already working to bring you back. You don't have to force it. You don't have to figure out how to fix it. You just have to trust the process that's already happening. Research in systems biology shows that the healthiest organisms aren't the ones with the least variation. They're the ones with the most flexible, responsive regulatory systems. It's not about never drifting out of balance. It's about having a system that can drift and return without getting stuck. And you have that system. It's working right now even as you feel off. Your body is making adjustments you're not aware of, releasing hormones, shifting neural patterns, recalibrating the countless processes that keep you alive and functional. It's doing what it's done every day of your life, working to bring you back to center. The feeling of being off isn't evidence that the system has failed. It's evidence that the system is in the process of correcting. You're not broken. You're not stuck. You're not permanently out of balance. You're just in the drift. And the drift is temporary by nature. Because living systems don't stay anywhere for long. They move. They oscillate. They drift out and return, drift out and return. This is what it means to be alive. Not to be perfectly balanced, but to be constantly balancing. Not to never feel off, but to feel off and trust that you won't stay there. Every time you felt this way before, you returned to center. Not because you did something remarkable, not because you figured out the perfect solution, but because that's what your system does. Automatically, naturally, given time and the right conditions. And the right conditions aren't complicated. They're rest, they're patience, they're stopping the constant pushing and allowing the natural regulatory processes to do their work. When you feel off, your first instinct is often to intervene, to do something, to take control of the rebalancing process. But you can't control it any more than you can control your heartbeat or your digestion. These are automatic processes. They happen whether you think about them or not, and they happen better when you don't interfere, when you don't add anxiety or urgency or self-judgment to what's already happening naturally. Tonight, you're out of balance. You know this because you feel it. But out of balance doesn't mean broken. It means you're in the temporary state of drift that all living systems experience. And your system already knows how to bring you back. It's already working on it. You don't have to figure out how to rebalance. You just have to stop interfering with the rebalancing that's already underway. Rest. Trust. Let the wisdom of your own biology do what it's been doing since the moment you were born. Your nervous system has two primary modes. One is activation, the other is rest. And you can't live in just one. You need both. Activation is what gets you through the day. It's alertness, focus, energy, the capacity to respond to demands and handle what needs handling. It's not the same as stress, though. It can become stress when it's sustained too long. In healthy doses, activation is what allows you to engage with life, to work, to connect, to respond. But you can't stay activated all the time. You're not designed to. After periods of activation, you need periods of rest, restoration, the downshift into a different state where your system can repair and replenish. This isn't optional. This is biological necessity. Your nervous system cycles between these states naturally, or it's supposed to. The problem is, modern life keeps us in activation far longer than we're built for. The demands don't stop. The notifications keep coming. The to-do list never empties. And your nervous system, trying to meet all of it, stays in activation mode. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. And eventually you end up in a strange in-between state. Not fully activated because you're too depleted for that. But not fully resting either because you can't quite let yourself. This in-between state is where feeling off lives. It's the experience of a nervous system that's been running too long and needs to downshift but doesn't quite know how anymore. Your body is sending signals that it's time to rest, but your mind is still pushing for activation. And in that conflict, everything feels wrong. You're tired but wired, exhausted but unable to relax, depleted but still going. And you interpret this as something being wrong with you, as evidence that you're not handling things well. But nothing is wrong with you. Your nervous system is just doing exactly what it does when it's been in activation mode for too long, without adequate rest. It starts to feel unstable, unpredictable, like you can't quite find solid ground. This is what dysregulation feels like. And it's not a character flaw, it's a physiological state. Neuroscience research shows that the autonomic nervous system, the part that controls activation and rest, operates in natural rhythms. You're supposed to move between sympathetic activation and parasympathetic rest throughout the day. Brief periods of activation followed by recovery. Work followed by genuine rest. Engagement followed by withdrawal. But when you skip the rest cycles too many times, when you override the signals, telling you to downshift the system loses its rhythm. It forgets how to transition smoothly between states. You end up stuck in a kind of chronic low-level activation that never quite tips into rest no matter how tired you are. And that feels awful, like you can't settle. Like you can't access the calm that should come naturally, like something is fundamentally off. But it's not fundamental, it's situational. Your nervous system hasn't forgotten how to rest. It's just been in activation mode for so long that it needs more time and permission to shift. Think of it like a car that's been running at high speed for hours. You can't just slam it into park. You have to gradually slow down. Give the engine time to cool. Let the system settle before you shut it off. Your nervous system is the same. After prolonged activation, it needs a gentle, gradual transition back to rest. Not an immediate shutdown, a slow, deliberate downshift. And this takes time. More time than you probably want to give it. Because you're tired. You want to rest now. You want the calm to arrive immediately, but it doesn't work that way. The system has momentum. It can't reverse instantly. So you lie there, tired but unable to sleep, wanting rest but feeling restless, knowing you need to calm down but unable to access calm. And this creates frustration, which creates more activation, which makes rest even more elusive. This is the cycle. And it's common, more common than you probably realize. Because we've all been trained to override our natural rhythms, to push through fatigue, to stay activated even when our bodies are begging for rest. And we can do it for a while. Humans are remarkably resilient, but eventually the system demands what it needs. And when it does, the transition back to rest takes longer than it would have if you'd been cycling naturally all along. This doesn't mean you've damaged anything. It just means you need to give your nervous system time to remember its natural rhythm. And you do that by creating conditions for rest, even when rest doesn't come immediately. By lying still, even when your mind is racing. By breathing slowly, even when your heart is beating fast. By removing demands, even when you don't feel relaxed yet. You're not trying to force rest. You're creating the environment where rest becomes possible again. And eventually, not right away, but eventually your nervous system will downshift. The activation will ease. The restlessness will settle. The feeling of being wired will give way to the feeling of being tired. And then, finally, you'll be able to rest the way you've been needing to. But it starts with understanding that feeling off isn't a state you're stuck in. It's a phase in the cycle between activation and rest. A phase that's uncomfortable, yes, but also temporary and navigable. You're not broken. Your nervous system isn't malfunctioning. It's just been running for too long, and it needs the time and space to cycle back to its resting state. Tonight, you might not feel calm yet. You might still feel that uncomfortable in-between state. But that doesn't mean rest won't come. It just means your nervous system is still in the transition. And transitions take time. So you can stop trying to force the shift and simply allow it, knowing that your body knows how to return to rest, even if it can't do it immediately. Your body doesn't live in the present the way your mind does. Your mind can recognize when a stressful situation has passed, when the deadline is met, when the conflict is resolved, when the threat is no longer present. But your body remembers. It holds onto the physiological response long after the stimulus is gone. This is one of the most confusing aspects of feeling off. You look at your life and think, nothing is wrong right now. Why do I still feel this way? And the answer is because the feeling isn't about right now. It's about what already happened. Stress doesn't disappear the moment the stressful event ends. It leaves traces, residue, a kind of physiological echo that continues reverberating through your system. Your cortisol levels don't immediately return to baseline. Your muscle tension doesn't instantly release. Your nervous system doesn't switch off the alert mode the second the danger passes. It lingers, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Sometimes, if the stress was significant or prolonged, for weeks or even months. And during that time, you feel the effects even though you can't point to a current cause. You feel anxious even though nothing threatening is happening. You feel exhausted even though the demanding period is over. You feel off even though objectively things are fine now. This isn't your mind playing tricks on you. This is your body processing what it went through. Think about physical injury. If you sprain your ankle, it doesn't heal the moment you stop walking on it. It stays swollen, tender, painful to touch, for days, sometimes weeks. You can see the injury. You can understand why it still hurts, even though you're no longer doing the thing that caused it. Stress works the same way, except you can't see it. There's no visible swelling, no obvious bruise, just this lingering discomfort that seems to have no source. But it does have a source. It's just in the past, not the present. Maybe you went through a difficult period at work. Weeks of high pressure, long hours, constant demands. And now that period is over. The project is done. The pressure is off. But you still feel tense. Still feel like you're bracing for something. Still can't quite relax. That's the stress lingering. Your body hasn't caught up to the fact that the situation has changed. Or maybe you had a conflict with someone you care about. It's resolved now. You talked it through. Everything is fine. But you still feel unsettled. Still feel that tight feeling in your chest. Still can't quite shake the discomfort. Again, the stress is lingering. The emotional intensity of the conflict created a physiological response. And that response doesn't evaporate just because the conversation ended well. Research in psychophysiology shows that the body's stress response has its own timeline independent of cognitive understanding. You can know intellectually that you're safe, that the problem is solved, that there's no reason to feel stressed anymore. But your body will continue responding to the stress it registered until it completes its own processing cycle. And you can't rush that cycle. You can't think your way out of it or logic yourself into feeling better. You can only give it time and space and the conditions it needs to complete the process. This is why rest after stressful periods is so important. Not just sleep, but genuine downtime where you're not demanding anything from your system. Because your body is still working, still processing, still clearing out the chemical remnants of the stress response. And it can't do that efficiently if you immediately move on to the next thing. Most people don't give themselves this processing time. The moment the stressful period ends, they move on. They expect to feel better immediately. And when they don't, they assume something is wrong. They think, I should be over this by now. Why am I still feeling this way? But there's no should. There's just the reality of how bodies work. And bodies work slowly. They need time to metabolize stress hormones, time to release muscle tension, time to recalibrate the nervous system. This isn't weakness. This isn't inefficiency. This is biology. And fighting it, telling yourself you shouldn't still feel stressed, that you should be better by now, just adds more stress to a system that's already trying to recover. The kindest thing you can do is acknowledge that your body is still processing. That the feeling isn't about what's happening now, it's about what happened before. And that it will pass. It always does. But it passes in its own time, not on the schedule you'd prefer. Tonight, you might be feeling the residue of something that ended days ago, weeks ago, maybe even longer. Your mind has moved on, but your body is still clearing it out. And that's okay. That's normal. That's just how the system works. You don't need to be frustrated with yourself for still feeling it. You don't need to wonder why you can't just let it go. You can simply recognize my body is still processing. It's doing its work. And eventually it will be done. The stress will clear, the residue will fade. The feeling will pass. Not because you forced it or figured it out, but because that's what bodies do when you give them enough time and enough rest. Your brain has a very limited vocabulary for communicating what your body needs. It doesn't have a precise signal for "you need 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep," or "your system is depleted and requires 3 days of doing very little." Instead, it has one general alarm: something is wrong. And when you're deeply tired, not just sleepy, but truly depleted at a cellular level, your brain sounds that alarm. It tells you something is off, something doesn't feel right, something needs attention, but it doesn't tell you what. So you start looking for problems, scanning your life for what might be causing this feeling of wrongness. You examine your relationships, your work, your choices, your future. And because you're looking for problems, you find them, or you create them. You interpret neutral situations as negative. You blow small concerns out of proportion. You catastrophize about things that on a different day wouldn't bother you at all. But the actual problem isn't any of those things. The actual problem is that you're exhausted, and your brain is interpreting that exhaustion as existential discomfort. This is one of the cruelest tricks of fatigue. It makes you feel like your life is wrong, when really you just need rest. It makes you question everything, when really you just need to stop questioning and sleep. Research in cognitive neuroscience shows that sleep deprivation and chronic fatigue significantly alter how the brain processes information. When you're well rested, your brain can distinguish between minor inconveniences and genuine problems. It maintains perspective. But when you're depleted, everything registers as a problem. The brain's threat detection system becomes hyperactive. Small setbacks feel catastrophic. Minor uncertainties feel unbearable. Normal challenges feel impossible. None of this is accurate. It's all just fatigue distorting your perception. But you can't see the distortion from inside it. When you're that tired, the distorted view feels like reality. You genuinely believe things are as bad as they seem. You genuinely feel like something fundamental is wrong. And so you start trying to fix things that aren't actually broken. You make big decisions, have difficult conversations, initiate major changes, all because you're trying to address what feels like a life problem when it's actually just a rest problem. And here's the particularly difficult part when you're this tired. Rest itself can feel impossible. You lie down but can't sleep. You try to relax but can't settle. You know you need rest but can't seem to access it. This creates a terrible cycle. You're tired, which makes everything feel wrong, which creates anxiety, which makes it harder to rest, which makes you more tired. And round, you go, getting more depleted and more convinced that something is fundamentally wrong with your life. But nothing is fundamentally wrong. You're just caught in the fatigue-anxiety loop. And the only way out is to interrupt the loop, to stop treating the discomfort as a sign that something needs to change and start treating it as a sign that something needs to stop. Not stop permanently, just stop long enough for your system to catch up, long enough for your brain to restore its ability to assess situations accurately instead of through the distorted lens of depletion. This means prioritizing rest, even when it doesn't come easily, even when you don't feel relaxed. Creating the conditions for rest, lying still, breathing slowly, removing stimulation, even before your body feels ready to actually rest. Because your body won't feel ready until you've been resting for a while. The readiness comes after you start, not before. Think of it like priming a pump. You have to put in effort before the water starts flowing. You have to rest before you feel rested. You have to be still before you feel settled. And in that gap between when you start resting and when rest actually arrives, you'll probably still feel off, still feel like something is wrong, still feel uncomfortable and unsettled. But that discomfort isn't evidence that rest isn't working. It's evidence that you're so depleted that your system needs significant time to shift states. The discomfort is the fatigue itself. And the only cure for fatigue is time spent not depleting yourself further. Tonight, what feels like existential wrongness might just be profound tiredness. What feels like your life being off track might just be your body being off balance. And what feels like it needs solving might just need sleeping. You don't need to figure out what's wrong. You don't need to fix anything. You just need to rest, truly rest. And trust that when you do, the world will look different. Not because it changed, but because you'll finally be seeing it clearly again. There's a fundamental confusion we all carry about feelings. We think they're reporting systems, accurate messengers delivering true information about our circumstances. When we feel bad, we assume things are bad. When we feel anxious, we assume there's something to be anxious about. When we feel off, we assume something is actually wrong. But feelings don't work that way. Feelings are not facts. They're states, temporary conditions influenced by countless variables that have nothing to do with the actual quality of your life. Your blood sugar, your sleep debt, the weather, the hormonal shifts happening in your body right now, the accumulation of small stresses from the past week, the lingering effects of a conversation from yesterday, the unconscious processing of information you're not even aware you absorbed. All of these things shape how you feel, and none of them necessarily reflect what's actually happening in your life. You can have a genuinely good life and feel terrible. You can have real problems and feel surprisingly okay. The feeling and the reality operate on different tracks. Sometimes they align, often they don't. And when they don't, when you feel awful but can't point to anything specifically wrong, you usually make one of two mistakes. Either you decide the feeling must be right and start looking for problems to justify it, or you decide the feeling is invalid because there's no clear cause, and you judge yourself for feeling this way. Both responses miss the truth. The feeling is real, but it's not necessarily telling you anything accurate about your circumstances. It's telling you something about your current state, your internal weather, the condition of your nervous system right now. And that condition can be influenced by so many things that have nothing to do with whether your life is actually going well or poorly. Think about how different the world looks when you're well rested versus exhausted, when you've eaten recently versus when you're hungry. The circumstances are identical, but the feeling, the entire emotional tone of your experience is completely different. Same life, different state, different feeling. This is why you can wake up one morning feeling optimistic about your job, your relationships, your future, and wake up the next morning feeling hopeless about those exact same things. Nothing changed overnight. Your job didn't get worse. Your relationships didn't deteriorate. Your future didn't become more uncertain. But your state changed, and with it, your feelings changed. And with those feelings, your entire perception of your life changed. This is not a flaw in how you work. This is just how human perception works. We don't see reality directly. We see it filtered through our current emotional state. And that filter changes constantly based on factors we're often not even aware of. Psychologists call this affect as information, the tendency to use your current mood as information about the world, even when your mood has nothing to do with the actual state of the world. You feel anxious, so you assume there's something to be anxious about. You feel sad, so you assume your life is sad. But the anxiety might just be leftover activation from yesterday. The sadness might just be fatigue masquerading as emotion. The feeling is real. The information you're deriving from it isn't necessarily accurate. And here's where this gets particularly important when you feel off, when everything seems wrong, in ways you can't articulate. Your instinct is to trust that feeling as truth. To believe that if you feel this bad, something must be this bad. But it's not. Not necessarily. What's bad is your current state. Your nervous system is dysregulated. Your body is depleted. Your emotional filter is set to everything is harder than it should be. And through that filter, even good things look concerning. Even stable things look precarious. Even manageable things look overwhelming. But that's the filter talking, not reality. The way to tell the difference is to check the facts separate from the feeling. Not to dismiss the feeling it's real and it matters, but to assess your actual circumstances, independent of the emotional tone they're currently wrapped in. Are you actually in danger, or do you just feel unsafe? Is your relationship actually failing? Or does it just feel distant right now? Is your life actually falling apart? Or does it just feel unmanageable at the moment? Often when you separate the feeling from the facts, you discover that the facts are more neutral than the feeling suggests. Things aren't perfect, but they're not catastrophic either. They're just there, existing. Neither particularly good, nor particularly bad. But the feeling makes them seem dire, makes them feel urgent, makes them appear to require immediate intervention. And if you act on the feeling without checking the facts, you'll often make things worse. You'll have difficult conversations that don't need to happen. You'll make changes that don't need making. You'll create problems while trying to solve problems that were never actually there. This is why it's so important to learn to hold your feelings lightly when you're in a difficult state. Not to ignore them, not to suppress them, but to recognize them as information about your internal state rather than accurate assessments of external reality. To say, I feel terrible right now. This feeling is real and valid. And also, it may not be telling me the truth about my actual circumstances. Both things can be true simultaneously. You can honor the feeling while also questioning the conclusions you're drawing from it. You can give yourself compassion for how difficult this state is, while also recognizing that the state will pass and things will look different when it does. Because they always do. Every single time you've felt this way before, your perception eventually shifted. Not because your life suddenly got better, but because your state changed. The filter lifted, and you could see more clearly again. The same things that looked hopeless last week looked manageable this week. The same situations that felt unbearable at night felt tolerable in the morning. Nothing about the situations changed. Everything about your state changed. And with it, everything about how those situations felt changed. Tonight, you might be looking at your life through the lens of feeling off. And through that lens, everything probably looks worse than it is. More precarious, more wrong, more in need of fixing. But that's the lens, not the life. Your life is what it is with its genuine challenges and its real gifts, its actual problems, and its true sources of meaning. The feeling of off doesn't change any of that. It just changes how you're seeing it right now. And when your state shifts, when you're more rested, more regulated, more resourced, you'll see it differently. Not because you've changed your life, but because you've changed your state. So tonight, you don't have to believe everything you feel. You don't have to treat your current emotional state as an accurate assessment of your life. You can acknowledge that you feel off, while also recognizing that this feeling is temporary, state-dependent, and not necessarily reflective of your actual circumstances. The feeling is real, but it's not the whole truth. Your body is always working. Right now, as you read this, your heart is beating approximately 60 to 100 times per minute. Your lungs are exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide with each breath. Your digestive system is processing whatever you last ate. Your immune system is identifying and eliminating threats. Your cells are dying and regenerating. Your brain is firing thousands of neural signals every second. All of this happens without your conscious involvement, without your permission, without you even noticing. But there are other processes, deeper, more fundamental processes, that can only happen when you stop, when you're not moving, not thinking, not demanding anything from your system. These are the restoration processes, and they require stillness. Not the stillness of sleep necessarily, though sleep is certainly part of it, but the stillness of genuine rest, of doing nothing, of being in a state where your system can redirect all its resources toward repair and renewal instead of action and response. Modern life doesn't create much space for this kind of stillness. There's always something to do, something to think about, something to respond to. Even when you're sitting down, you're probably looking at a screen, processing information, staying alert and engaged. Your body is never truly still. Your mind is never truly quiet. And in the absence of stillness, the restoration processes can't fully activate. They still happen. Your body is remarkably good at maintaining basic function even under suboptimal conditions. But they happen incompletely, insufficiently, just enough to keep you going, but not enough to truly restore you. And over time, this creates deficit, a kind of restoration debt that keeps accumulating. You keep spending energy without fully replenishing it. Keep breaking down tissue without fully rebuilding it. Keep activating stress responses without fully completing them. And eventually, you feel it. That sense of being depleted, run down, off. Not because anything specific is wrong, but because you haven't been still enough long enough for your body to do its deeper work. Think about what happens when you cut yourself. The wound closes, the tissue repairs, the skin grows back. But this doesn't happen while you're actively using that part of your body. It happens during rest, during stillness. The same is true for every restorative process in your system. Muscle repair happens during rest, not during exercise. Tissue regeneration happens during sleep, not during activity. Neural consolidation. The process of integrating experiences and forming memories happens when you're not actively processing new information. Even emotional processing requires stillness, requires you to stop taking in new experiences long enough to digest the ones you've already had. But we rarely give ourselves this. We move from one thing to the next, one demand to the next, one piece of information to the next. We treat rest as something we do when everything else is done, a reward we earn, a luxury we can't quite afford. But rest isn't a luxury. It's a biological necessity. It's the space where your body completes all the processes it couldn't complete while you were in motion, where it clears metabolic waste from your brain, repairs cellular damage, rebalances hormones, consolidates memories, processes emotions. None of these things can happen efficiently when you're still demanding output from your system. They require you to stop, to be still, to allow your body to shift all its resources toward internal maintenance rather than external engagement. This is why you can sleep for 8 hours and still wake up feeling unrefreshed if you went to bed with your mind racing, your body tense, your nervous system still in activation mode. Because sleep is necessary but not sufficient. You need stillness before sleep. Stillness that allows your system to shift into its restorative mode. And you need stillness during waking hours too. Periods where you're not producing, not consuming, not engaging, just being, breathing, existing without agenda. This feels impossibly unproductive to most people. It feels like wasting time, but it's not. It's allowing time. Time for your body to do work that's invisible but essential. Research in chronobiology shows that the body has natural cycles of activity and rest. And when we override the rest cycles repeatedly, we disrupt the entire system. We can function for a while on insufficient restoration, but eventually the deficit catches up with us. And that's when we start feeling off. When we can't quite pinpoint what's wrong, but we know something isn't right. Often what's not right is simply that we haven't been still, haven't allowed our body the space it needs to restore itself. We've been running on partial restoration for so long that we've forgotten what full restoration even feels like. And so we think something is broken, something needs fixing. But nothing is broken. We just need to stop long enough for repair to happen. Tonight, your body is asking for stillness, real stillness, not the stillness of sitting on the couch scrolling through your phone, not the stillness of watching television while thinking about tomorrow, but the stillness of lying down with nothing to do, no information to process, no problems to solve, no demands to meet, just breath, just sensation, just the quiet hum of a body doing its work. This might feel boring, it might feel uncomfortable at first, because your system isn't used to it. It's used to stimulation, to distraction, to always having something to attend to. But beneath that discomfort is the restoration process trying to activate. Your body knows what to do in stillness. It's been doing it since before you were born. It just needs you to get out of the way, to stop adding new demands, to allow it to focus entirely on the internal work of repair. You don't have to do anything to make this happen. You don't have to try to restore yourself. You just have to be still, and your body will do the rest. Tonight, you don't need to figure anything out. You don't need to be productive or engaged or even particularly relaxed. You just need to be still, to lie here, breathing, existing, taking up space. And in that stillness, quietly, without fanfare, your body will begin the work it's been waiting to do. The restoration, the repair, the return to balance. Not because you earned it, just because stillness allows it. There's a particular kind of panic that comes with feeling disconnected from your own life. When you're going through the motions, but not really present. When you're technically participating, but not actually feeling anything. when the days pass and you can't quite remember what happened in them because you weren't really there. This disconnection feels like emergency, like something vital is slipping away, like life is happening without you and you're missing it. And in response to that panic, you try to force connection, try to feel more, try to be more present, try to grab onto the moments as they pass. But the harder you try, the more disconnected you feel. Because you can't force presence, you can't manufacture engagement. Connection isn't something you do, it's something that happens when the conditions are right. And right now, the conditions aren't right. You're depleted, dysregulated, running on empty. And when your system is in that state, disconnection is actually protective. It's your nervous system creating distance between you and experience. Because you don't have the capacity to fully process experience right now. It's not abandonment, it's conservation. Your system is saying, we don't have enough resources to engage fully with everything right now, so we're going to create some buffer, some space, some distance. This allows you to keep functioning to get through the days to meet the basic demands without completely overwhelming your already taxed system. It's not ideal. It doesn't feel good, but it's adaptive. It's your body's way of protecting you from complete collapse when you're already close to your limit. And here's what you need to understand. Life continues during this period, even when you feel disconnected from it. Your relationships don't disappear. Your responsibilities don't evaporate. The world doesn't stop. Everything keeps moving. Everything keeps happening. You just can't feel it fully right now, can't access the emotional richness of it, can't be as present with it as you'd like to be. But that doesn't mean it's lost. It doesn't mean you're missing your life. It doesn't mean the disconnection is permanent. It just means you're in a phase, a temporary state where your system is protecting itself by creating distance. And when your capacity returns, when you're more rested, more resourced, more regulated, the connection will return too. Not because you forced it, but because connection is the natural state when you have enough internal resources to meet external experience. Think about watching a movie when you're exhausted versus when you're well rested. Same movie, but when you're exhausted, you can't really take it in. You're watching it, but you're not absorbing it, not feeling it, not engaging with it. When you're rested, the same movie moves you, captures you, creates emotional resonance. The difference isn't the movie, it's your capacity to meet it. Right now, your capacity is low, so you can't fully meet your life, can't fully feel your relationships, can't fully engage with your experiences. But they're still there, still happening, still real. Your partner still loves you, even if you can't feel it right now. Your children still need you, even if you're going through the motions. Your work still matters, even if you're showing up on autopilot. The disconnection is in you, not in the things themselves. And when you restore, when you rebuild your capacity, you'll be able to feel them again. Connect with them again. Be present with them again. Nothing is being lost. Everything is being held. Your life is continuing. Your relationships are continuing. Time is moving forward. And you're moving with it even if you're not fully conscious of the movement right now. This is hard to trust. Because it feels like if you're not fully present, you're somehow not really living. But you are. You're living exactly as much as your current capacity allows. And that capacity will expand again. It always does. Every time you've felt this disconnection before, it eventually lifted. Connection returned. presence came back. Not because you did anything heroic, but because you rested enough for your system to have resources again. And when you had resources, connection became possible again. Tonight, you might feel very far from your own life, like you're watching it from a distance instead of living it. And that might create fear. Fear that you're losing something, missing something, that by the time you feel connected again, it will be too late. But it won't be. Life is patient. It waits. It continues whether you're fully present with it or not. And when you return to presence, when your system has what it needs to fully engage again, everything will still be there. Your relationships, your responsibilities, your days, all of it will still be there, waiting for you to feel it again. And you will. Not through force or effort, but through rest, through restoration, through giving your system what it needs to rebuild the capacity for connection. You're trying to think your way back to clarity, analyzing, processing, trying to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it. You're convinced that if you can just understand the problem clearly enough, the solution will reveal itself. The fog will lift. Everything will make sense again. But that's not how clarity works. Clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It doesn't come from analyzing more thoroughly. It doesn't come from forcing your mind to work through the confusion. Clarity comes from rest, from space, from stopping the effortful thinking long enough for something deeper to surface. Think about the last time you were trying to remember something, a name, a word, a detail, and you couldn't. The harder you tried, the more elusive it became. The more you focused on it, the further away it seemed. And then hours later, when you'd stopped trying, when you were doing something completely unrelated, it just appeared, effortlessly, obviously. That's how clarity works. It's not something you force, it's something that emerges when you stop forcing, when you create space, when you allow your mind to rest instead of demanding that it produce answers. Right now, you're in the effortful phase, pushing, straining, trying to think your way through this feeling of being off. But that effort is actually blocking clarity, not creating it. Because clarity requires a quiet mind, a rested mind, a mind that's not exhausted from trying to solve unsolvable problems. And your mind is exhausted. It's been working overtime trying to make sense of something that might not make sense yet. Trying to find answers that might not exist yet. Trying to create understanding before the understanding is ready to form. This is like trying to force a flower to bloom. You can't make it happen faster by pulling on the petals. You can only create the right conditions, water, sunlight, soil, and then wait. The blooming happens in its own time. Clarity is the same. You can't force it. You can only create conditions where it becomes possible. And those conditions are usually the opposite of what you've been doing. Not more thinking, but less. Not more analysis, but less. Not more effort, but rest. Neuroscience research shows that insight and clarity often emerge during periods of mental rest, during sleep, during walks, during activities that don't require focused attention. This is because clarity doesn't come from the part of your brain that's doing the effortful thinking. It comes from deeper processing that happens when the thinking mind quiets down. Your brain is always working in the background, integrating information, making connections, forming understanding. But you can't hear that background work when the foreground is too loud. When you're actively trying to figure everything out, you drown out the quiet voice of deeper knowing. So the answers you're looking for, the clarity you're desperately seeking, might already be forming somewhere beneath your conscious awareness. But you can't access it yet because you haven't created enough quiet to hear it. This is why people often have their best insights in the shower, or just before falling asleep, or while driving on a long, familiar route. These are moments when the effortful mind relaxes, when active thinking gives way to passive awareness, and in that space clarity surfaces. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying and allowed something else to emerge. Tonight, you probably want answers. You want to understand why you feel this way. You want to know what to do about it. And the not knowing feels intolerable. So you keep thinking, keep analyzing, keep trying to force understanding. But what if the understanding isn't available yet? What if it's still forming? What if it needs more time to emerge? Then all your effortful thinking isn't helping. It's just creating more noise, more confusion, more exhaustion. The wisest thing you could do is stop. Stop trying to figure it out. Stop demanding answers. Stop pushing for clarity. And just wait. Rest. Allow your mind to be quiet for a while. Not forever. Just for tonight. Just long enough to give the deeper processes room to work. Because clarity will come. It always does. Sometimes it comes suddenly, a moment of insight that arrives complete and whole. Sometimes it comes gradually, a slow clarification that happens so subtly you don't even notice, until one day you realize you understand something you didn't understand before. But it comes, without force, without effort, without you having to manufacture it. You've experienced this before, many times. You just forget in the middle of confusion. The confusion is temporary. You forget that you've been unclear before and become clear again. You've been lost before and found your way again. Not because you figured it out through sheer mental effort, but because you gave it time and space and rest. And the clarity emerged on its own in its own time when you were ready to receive it. Tonight, you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to figure it out. You don't need to force clarity that isn't ready to come yet. You can stop trying. Stop pushing. Stop demanding answers from a mind that needs rest more than it needs analysis. And trust, even if you can't feel it, that clarity will return. Not because you earned it, just because that's what clarity does. It leaves and it returns in its own time, without you having to force it. You're waiting for the moment when everything suddenly feels better. The breakthrough, the turning point, the day when you wake up and the heaviness is gone, replaced by lightness and clarity. You're waiting for resolution, for the feeling to lift dramatically, for a clear signal that this difficult period is over. But that's not usually how it happens. Most of the time, these periods don't end with a bang. They don't resolve in a single dramatic moment. They just fade. So gradually that you don't even notice it's happening, until one day you realize you feel different. Not perfectly fine, not completely restored, just lighter, a little more yourself, a little less burdened. And you can't even pinpoint when it changed. There was no specific moment, no clear before and after, just a slow, quiet shift from heavy to bearable, from overwhelming to manageable, from off to okay. This is how most difficult emotional states resolve, without fanfare, without announcement, without you even realizing they're lifting until they've already mostly lifted. And because we expect resolution to be dramatic, we often miss the actual resolution happening. We keep waiting for the big moment while the small moments are quietly accumulating into change. We keep bracing for transformation while the subtle shifts are already transforming us. Think about physical healing again. When you have a cold, you don't wake up one morning suddenly completely well. You wake up slightly less congested. Your throat hurts a little less. You have slightly more energy. Small improvements that you might not even notice if you're looking for complete recovery. But those small improvements are the recovery. That's what healing looks like in real time. Not dramatic, not obvious, just incremental shifts toward wellness that eventually accumulate into being well again. Emotional and psychological healing works the same way. The feeling of being off doesn't lift all at once. It lifts in degrees. One morning, you sleep slightly better. One afternoon, you feel slightly more present. One evening, you notice you're not as anxious as you were last week. These moments are easy to dismiss. They don't feel like enough. They don't feel like the resolution you're waiting for. But they are the resolution. They're just happening so gradually that you can't see the full arc while you're in it. You only see it in retrospect. Looking back, you realize, oh, I don't feel that way anymore. When did that change? And usually you can't answer, because it didn't change in one moment. It changed in 1,000 small moments you didn't notice. This is actually a mercy, because if resolution required a dramatic shift, you'd have to wait until you had enough energy for drama. But quiet resolution doesn't require energy. It doesn't require effort or attention or even awareness. It just requires time. And the absence of things that make it worse. Time where you're not adding new stressors. Time where you're not demanding too much from yourself. Time where you're resting even imperfectly, even inconsistently. And in that time, without you noticing, things shift. Your nervous system gradually regulates. Your body gradually restores. Your mind gradually clears. Not all at once. Not in a way you can track or measure. Just gradually, quietly, inevitably. Research in psychology shows that most mental health improvements happen this way through gradual accumulation of small changes rather than sudden breakthroughs. People often report that they just started feeling better without being able to identify what specifically helped or when exactly things changed. This frustrates the analytical mind. We want to know what worked, what made the difference, what we should do next time. But often, there's no clear answer. Things just got better over time the way most things do when you stop making them worse and give them space to heal. Tonight, you might be looking for that moment of resolution. That clear signal that this period is ending. But it probably won't come that way. You probably won't wake up tomorrow feeling completely different. Instead, maybe tomorrow you'll sleep 20 minutes longer. Or you'll have one moment in the afternoon where you feel almost normal. Or you'll notice that the tight feeling in your chest isn't quite as tight. Small things, barely noticeable things. But those barely noticeable things are the resolution beginning. That's what it looks like at the start. And if you dismiss them because they're not dramatic enough, you'll miss the fact that change is already happening. You'll keep waiting for the big moment while the small moments are quietly carrying you back to yourself. So instead of waiting for everything to suddenly feel right, you can start noticing when things feel slightly less wrong. Not as a demand, not as something you have to track or measure or prove. Just as a gentle awareness yesterday was very heavy. Today is still heavy, but maybe slightly less so. That's enough. That's a progress. That's the quiet resolution already underway. And tomorrow might be the same as today, or it might be slightly lighter still. You can't control the pace. You can't force it to happen faster. You can only allow it to unfold in its own time. And it will. It always does. Every difficult period you've ever been through has eventually resolved. Not always how you wanted. Not always as quickly as you hoped. But it resolved. The heaviness lifted. The clarity returned. Life became bearable again, then okay again, then sometimes even good again. And this period will be the same. It's already the same. The resolution is already beginning, even if you can't see it yet, even if it feels like nothing is changing, even if you're still waiting for that dramatic moment. The change is happening quietly, in the background, in the small accumulations you're not tracking. And one day, maybe soon, maybe not yet, you'll notice. You'll realize you feel different, not perfect, not completely healed, just better, lighter, more yourself. And you'll look back and wonder when exactly that happened, and you won't be able to pinpoint it. Because it didn't happen in one moment. It happened in all the small moments you lived through while you were waiting for the big one. Tonight, you don't need the dramatic resolution. You don't need to wake up tomorrow feeling completely different. You just need to trust that quiet shifts are already happening, that healing doesn't announce itself, that most of the time things get better, so gradually you don't notice until you're already better. And that's not a flaw. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. Your mind doesn't remember patterns well. It remembers events, specific moments, individual instances. But patterns, the larger arc of how things unfold over time, your mind tends to forget those. So each time you feel this way, each time everything feels off, and you can't quite say why it feels brand new, it feels like the first time, like something unprecedented, like maybe this time it won't pass, but your body remembers. Your body has been through this before, many times. And it knows something your mind keeps forgetting. It knows that this feeling is temporary, that it always passes, that you've survived every single difficult night that came before this one. Your body carries the memory of every other time you felt exactly this way. Every other night, you lay awake feeling wrong in ways you couldn't articulate. Every other period where everything felt harder than it should. And your body also carries the memory of what happened next. It passed, always, without exception. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but always eventually. The fog lifted, the heaviness eased, the sense of wrongness faded, and you returned to yourself. Not because you did something brilliant, not because you figured something out, but because that's what these states do. They pass. They're temporary by nature. They arise, they persist for a while, and then they recede. Like weather, like seasons, like every other cycle in nature. But your mind forgets this, every single time. Because in the middle of the feeling, when you're fully immersed in it, it doesn't feel temporary. It feels permanent. It feels like this is just how things are now, how you are now, and maybe how you'll always be. Your mind can't see past the current state, can't remember that you felt this way before and it didn't last. But your body can. Your body holds the evidence your mind keeps losing. Your body knows that it has restored itself before, that it has regulated itself before, that it has moved through difficulty before and emerged on the other side. This isn't just metaphorical. This is biological fact. Your body's regulatory systems have experience with recovering from dysregulation. Your nervous system has patterns stored for returning to baseline after periods of stress. Your cells have repaired themselves countless times. Your systems have rebalanced themselves repeatedly, and they will do it again. Not because you're trying to make them, but because that's what they're designed to do. Think about every other time you felt overwhelmed. Every other time you were convinced you couldn't handle something. Every other time the future looked impossible. You handled it. Every single time you found a way through, or time found a way through for you. Either way, you're here. On the other side of all those moments that felt insurmountable, and tonight feels the same way. Insurmountable. Endless. Like maybe this time is different, but it's not different. It's the same pattern your mind keeps forgetting and your body keeps remembering. The pattern of difficulty arising, persisting, and passing. The pattern of dysregulation and restoration. The pattern of feeling lost and then eventually finding your way again. This pattern is so reliable that you can trust it even when you can't feel it. Even when your mind is insisting, this time is different, this time won't pass. This time you're really stuck. Your body knows otherwise. Your body has evidence. Years of evidence, decades of evidence. Every difficult night that eventually became morning. Every impossible period that eventually became possible again. Every time you were certain you'd never feel okay again, and then gradually or suddenly you did. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's the pattern, the reliable repeated pattern of how human systems work. They move through difficulty. They don't stay stuck in it forever, even when it feels that way. And you have moved through difficulty so many times already, more times than you can probably even remember. But your body remembers. It remembers in its tissues, in its regulatory patterns, in the deep wordless knowing that lives below conscious thought. It knows you have survived every version of "I can't handle this" you've ever experienced. And it knows you'll survive this one too. Not because you're special, not because you're strong, but because this is what bodies do, what systems do, what life does. It moves, it shifts, it changes state, and no state lasts forever. Not the good ones, and not the difficult ones. Everything passes, everything moves, everything transitions into something else. Tonight feels heavy, feels stuck, feels like it might last forever. But it won't. It can't. That's not how any of this works. Your body knows this, even if your mind doesn't. Your cells know this, even if your thoughts don't. And on some level deeper than words, you know this too. You've always known it, because you've lived it, over and over again. The cycle of difficulty and relief, of struggle and ease, of feeling off and returning to okay. You're in the difficult part of the cycle right now. And that's hard. That's real. That deserves acknowledgement. But the difficult part is not the only part. And it's not the permanent part. It's the part that comes before the shift, before the relief, before the eventual return to yourself. And that return is coming. Not because you're working for it, not because you've earned it, but because it always comes. Because it's part of the pattern. Because you've been here before and you didn't stay here forever. And you won't this time either. Your body knows this, even when your mind forgets, even when you can't feel it. Even when you're convinced this time is different, Your body remembers you have felt this before, and it passed every single time, without exception. This will too. There's a belief most of us carry without even realizing it. The belief that understanding is required before we can rest. That we need to know why we feel this way before we can allow ourselves to stop struggling with it. That we owe ourselves or someone an explanation, a reason, a clear, articulable cause. And until we have that explanation, we don't deserve rest. We haven't earned it. We need to keep working, keep analyzing, keep trying to understand. But this belief is wrong, and it's costing you peace. Because understanding is not a prerequisite for rest. You don't need to know why you feel off in order to allow yourself to sleep. You don't need to solve the mystery before you can close your eyes. You don't need clarity before you can have peace. These things are not connected the way you think they are. Rest is not a reward you receive after you've figured everything out. Rest is the foundation that makes figuring anything out possible. You can rest while confused. You can sleep while uncertain. You can be at peace while not having any answers. These states can coexist. They do coexist, more often than you realize. Think about a young child who's upset. They're crying, but they can't tell you why. They don't have the words. They don't understand their own feelings. Do they need to understand before they can be comforted? Before they can rest? No. They just need to be held, to feel safe, to know they're okay, even without understanding. And then from that place of safety and rest, sometimes the understanding comes, or sometimes it doesn't. And they're okay either way. You're not that different. You're older, you have more words, but the fundamental truth is the same. You don't need to understand your feelings to deserve comfort, to deserve rest, to deserve peace. You're allowed to feel off and not know why. That's not a problem to solve before you can rest. That's just the reality of being human. Sometimes feelings arise from causes you can identify, and sometimes they arise from depths you can't trace. Sometimes you're sad for a clear reason, and sometimes you're just sad. Sometimes you're anxious about something specific, and sometimes you're just anxious. And in those moments when you can't identify the cause, you have a choice. You can treat the lack of understanding as a problem, something that needs to be solved before you can rest. Or you can treat it as irrelevant to your need for rest. One path leads to endless analysis, to lying awake trying to figure out what's wrong, to denying yourself peace until you have answers. The other path leads to rest, to saying, I don't know why I feel this way, and that's okay. I can rest anyway. This second path feels wrong to most people. It feels like giving up, like accepting defeat. But it's not. It's accepting reality. The reality that understanding and healing don't always move at the same pace, that sometimes your body needs to rest long before your mind has figured anything out. And if you wait for understanding before you rest, you might wait a very long time. Because understanding often requires rest, requires a clear, settled mind, requires the kind of perspective that only comes after you've stopped pushing. So by demanding understanding before rest, you create an impossible situation. You can't rest until you understand. But you can't understand until you rest. And round you go, getting more tired and more confused, convinced you're doing something wrong, because you can't break the cycle. But there's nothing wrong with you. You're just trying to rest on terms that don't work. Terms that say first clarity, then peace. First answers, then sleep. But the real order is usually reversed. First rest, then clarity. First peace, then understanding. Not always, but often enough that it's worth trying, worth releasing the demand for explanation, worth saying, I don't know why I feel this way, and I don't need to know tonight. This doesn't mean you never examine your feelings. It doesn't mean you never seek understanding. It just means you don't make understanding a condition for rest. You allow yourself to rest first, to restore your system, to create some space between you and the intensity of the feeling. And then from that more resourced place, you can look at it again if you want to. You can explore it. You can try to understand. But from rest, not toward rest. From peace, not toward peace. Tonight you might be lying here thinking you can't rest until you understand why you feel off. But you can. You really can. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your internal state. Not even yourself. You're allowed to feel things you can't explain. You're allowed to be confused. You're allowed to not have it all figured out. And you're allowed to rest anyway. To close your eyes anyway. To let go anyway. Understanding can come later, or it might never come. And either way, you still deserve rest. You don't need to know why. You don't need to have answers. You don't need to understand this feeling before you can allow yourself peace. You just need to recognize that rest is not something you earn through understanding. It's something you need regardless of understanding. And tonight, you need it. So you can have it, without explanation, without apology, without needing to know why you feel this way. You can just rest. This feeling, this sense that everything is off, that something is wrong, that you can't quite find your footing. It doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean something is fundamentally wrong with you. It means you're tired. That's all. That's the whole truth of it. Not broken, just tired. Tired in ways that go deeper than one night's sleep can fix. Tired in ways you probably didn't even realize were accumulating. Tired from carrying, from managing, from showing up, from trying, from being strong when you needed to be strong, from being okay when you needed to be okay, from all the ways you've been holding yourself together while life kept demanding more. This tiredness doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It makes you someone who's been living, really living, engaging with the full weight and complexity of existence. And sometimes that weight is heavy. Sometimes the complexity is exhausting. Sometimes you need to stop and rest. That's not failure. That's biology. You wouldn't judge your phone for needing to charge. You wouldn't call it broken when the battery runs low. You'd just plug it in. Let it restore. Understand that depleted batteries are a normal result of being used. You're not different. You're not broken just because you're depleted. You've been running, for a long time probably, using your energy, drawing on your reserves. And now those reserves are low and your system is telling you, I need rest, I need restoration, I need to stop for a while. That message, that feeling of being off, is not a sign of brokenness. It's a sign of honesty. Your body is being honest with you about what it needs. Your system is being honest about its limits. And limits aren't flaws. They're features. They're what keep you from completely burning out. What keep you from destroying yourself through endless depletion. They're your body's way of saying enough. Time to stop. Time to restore. And you can hear that message as condemnation, as evidence that you're not strong enough, not resilient enough, not capable enough. Or you can hear it as protection, as your body's wisdom intervening before things get worse. Feeling off is not a character flaw. It's a capacity indicator. It's telling you that you've reached your current limit, that you need to pause, that you need to allow restoration before you can continue. And everyone reaches their limits. Everyone, no matter how strong they are, no matter how capable, no matter how much they seem to have it together. Everyone has moments when they feel exactly what you're feeling right now, when everything feels wrong, when they can't quite find solid ground. And in those moments, they're not broken either. They're just tired, just depleted, just human. The difference is some people have learned to respond to that feeling with compassion instead of judgment. They've learned to say, I'm tired, I need rest, that's okay. Instead of, I'm broken, something is wrong with me, I should be able to handle this better. One response allows healing. The other adds suffering to what's already difficult. Tonight, you have a choice about which story you tell yourself. The story that says this feeling means you're fundamentally flawed, that you're not enough, that you're failing. Or the story that says this feeling means you're human, that you have limits, that you've been using your energy and now you need to restore it. Both stories will feel true in this moment because you're tired enough that everything feels true. But only one story actually helps. Only one story creates space for what you need. And what you need is not judgment, not shame, not more evidence of your inadequacy. What you need is rest, permission, understanding. You need to hear that you're not broken. That feeling this way doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means you've been going for a long time, carrying things, managing things, being responsible for things, and now you're tired. And tired is not the same as broken. Tired is a state, a temporary condition, something that changes with rest. Broken is permanent, fixed, unchangeable. And you're not permanent in this state. You're not fixed here. You won't always feel this way. You're just tired, depleted, in need of restoration. And that need doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive. Because only living things get tired. Only systems that are actively engaging with the world need to rest and restore. Only people who are truly showing up run the risk of running low. So this feeling, as uncomfortable as it is actually proof that you've been living, really living. And now you need to rest. Really rest. Not because you're broken, just because you're tired. And that's enough of a reason. That's always been enough of a reason. There's an urgency that comes with discomfort, a voice that insists this needs to be addressed. This needs to be resolved. This needs to be fixed right now. And that voice feels legitimate. It feels like wisdom, like your intuition guiding you toward necessary action. But it's not wisdom. It's just anxiety dressed up as productivity. Because nothing actually needs to be fixed tonight. Nothing is so urgent that it requires your attention in this moment. Your job will still be there tomorrow. Your relationships will still be there tomorrow. Your responsibilities will still be there tomorrow. And they will all be easier to address more clearly, more effectively when you're rested than when you're depleted. Right now, in your current state, you're not capable of fixing anything effectively anyway. Your judgment is compromised by fatigue. Your perspective is distorted by dysregulation. Your capacity for clear decision-making is diminished. So even if something genuinely needed fixing tonight would be the worst time to try. You'd be working with faulty equipment. making decisions from a state that doesn't reflect your true capacity or values, and those decisions would likely create more problems than they solve. This is why the wisest thing you can do tonight is nothing. Not because nothing matters, but because everything matters too much to address from this state. Whatever you're worried about deserves your best thinking, your clearest perspective, your most resourced self. And that's not who you are right now. Right now, you're someone who needs rest, who needs restoration, who needs time before action. Think about major decisions you've made while exhausted or overwhelmed. How many of them were good decisions? How many times have you said something in a moment of depletion that you later regretted, made a choice while dysregulated that you later wished you could take back? Probably more than once, because we all do this. We all know intellectually that we shouldn't make important decisions when we're not ourselves. But when we're in that state, it doesn't feel like bad judgment. It feels like clarity, like we're finally seeing things as they really are. The relationship that felt fine yesterday suddenly feels wrong. The job that was working suddenly feels impossible. The life that was manageable suddenly feels unbearable. And in that moment, it all feels so clear, so obvious, so urgent. But it's not clarity. It's exhaustion. It's the lens of depletion making everything look worse than it is. And if you act on that distorted perception, you'll often make things worse. You'll have conversations you don't need to have. You'll make changes you don't need to make. You'll create crises out of situations that were never crises to begin with. Not because you're foolish, but because you're human. And humans make their worst decisions when they're depleted. So tonight, the most intelligent thing you can do is recognize that you're not in a state to fix anything. You're in a state to rest, to pause, to create space between feeling and action. And that space is not avoidance. It's not procrastination. It's not ignoring problems. It's wisdom. It's knowing that some things need to wait until you're capable of addressing them well. And right now, you're not. You're tired. You're off balance. You're seeing everything through the filter of your current state. And that filter makes everything look more urgent, more broken, more in need of immediate intervention than it actually is. So you can make a different choice tonight. You can choose to believe that whatever needs addressing can wait. That the urgent feeling is not the same as actual urgency. That your need for rest is more important than your need to fix something right now. This takes trust. Trust that things won't fall apart if you don't address them immediately. Trust that tomorrow or next week, or whenever you're more resourced, you'll be able to see more clearly and respond more effectively. Trust that not everything that feels urgent actually is urgent. And here's the truth that you might not be able to feel right now, but is true. Anyway, most things can wait. Most problems don't get worse for being left alone for a night. Most decisions don't need to be made immediately. Most situations will still be there in the morning, and they'll be easier to assess accurately when you're rested. The few things that genuinely are urgent, true emergencies that require immediate response, you'll know. There will be no ambiguity. But this feeling of everything being urgent, this sense that you need to fix everything right now, that's not real urgency. That's just your nervous system in overdrive creating false alarms because it's too depleted to distinguish between what actually needs attention and what just feels uncomfortable. So you can make a radical choice tonight. You can choose to trust that nothing needs fixing right now, That whatever is wrong or whatever feels wrong can wait until you're more capable of addressing it. That your job right now is not to solve or fix or change. Your job right now is to rest, to let your systems settle, to let your nervous system regulate, to let your perspective restore itself. And from that more regulated place, you can look at everything again. You can assess what actually needs attention and what was just the depletion talking. You can make decisions from wisdom instead of urgency, from clarity instead of confusion. But that can only happen after rest, not before. So tonight, everything can wait. The problems, the questions, the decisions, the things that feel urgent, all of it can wait. Because none of it will benefit from your depleted attention, and all of it will benefit from you being rested, being resourced, being yourself again. You don't need to fix your life tonight. You don't need to solve the problems tonight. You don't need to figure anything out tonight. You just need to rest, to close your eyes, to let go of the urgent feeling long enough to allow your body to do what it needs to do. And in the morning, or in a few days, or whenever you're more rested, you can look at everything again. You can assess. You can decide. You can take action if action is needed. But tonight, nothing needs fixing. Nothing is so urgent that it can't wait. Everything can wait. Everything will wait. And the most important thing you can do for all of it, for your job, your relationships, your responsibilities, your life, it's to rest now so you can address it well later. Not from depletion, but from restoration. Not from urgency, but from clarity. And that clarity starts with choosing rest over fixing, choosing patience over action, choosing to trust that tonight nothing needs to be fixed. You're waiting for certainty before you allow yourself to rest. Waiting to understand what's wrong. Waiting to know what to do about it. Waiting to feel sure that everything is okay before you can let go. But certainty is not a prerequisite for rest. You don't need clear answers before you can close your eyes. You don't need to have everything figured out before you can sleep. You don't need certainty before you can have peace. These things are not connected the way you think they are. Rest is not something you earn after you've resolved all uncertainty. Rest is something you need regardless of uncertainty. In fact, you need it more when things are unclear, because uncertainty is exhausting. The mental effort of trying to figure things out, trying to see clearly, trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense. Yet all of that depletes you. And the more depleted you become, the less capable you are of finding the clarity you're seeking. So by refusing to rest until things are clear, you ensure that things stay unclear. Because you're too tired to see clearly. You're creating the exact condition you're trying to avoid, maintaining the confusion by refusing to rest until the confusion lifts. But it doesn't work that way. Clarity doesn't come first. Rest comes first. And clarity follows. Not always immediately, not always obviously, but eventually. It always does. Think about how different problems look in the morning versus late at night. The same situation that felt impossibly complex at midnight often looks much simpler at dawn. Not because anything changed about the situation, but because you changed. You rested, and rest restored your capacity to see clearly. Your body knows this. Your body doesn't require certainty before it can restore itself. It doesn't need to know that everything is okay before it can regulate. It doesn't need answers before it can heal. Your body can rest in uncertainty, in confusion, in not knowing. It does this all the time, actually. Every time you've ever slept without having all the answers. Every time you've rested despite unresolved questions, your body just rested. It didn't wait for permission from your mind. It didn't require everything to make sense. It just did what bodies do. It restored, it regulated, it healed, and it will do the same tonight if you let it. If you stop making clarity a condition for rest. Your mind is the one creating the problem. Your mind is the one saying you can't rest until you understand. But your mind is wrong. Not maliciously, just mistakenly. It's trying to protect you by staying vigilant, by refusing to let go until it's sure everything is okay. But that vigilance is costing you more than it's protecting you. It's keeping you in a state of chronic activation that's making everything harder, including the thing your mind is trying to do: figure things out. Understand. Find clarity. None of that can happen efficiently when you're this depleted, when your nervous system is this dysregulated. So the very strategy your mind is using, refusing to rest until things are clear, is sabotaging the goal it's trying to achieve. You need to rest first. Not as a reward, not as something you do after you've earned it through understanding, but as a necessity, as the foundation that makes everything else possible, including clarity, including understanding, including the resolution of uncertainty. Tonight, you don't need to know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't need to understand why you feel this way. You don't need to have a plan or a solution or a clear path forward. You just need to rest. And you can, even without knowing, even without understanding. Your body doesn't need your mind to have everything figured out before it can do its work. It just needs you to stop demanding that it stay alert and activated until you have answers. It needs you to give it permission to rest in the uncertainty, to let go even though things aren't clear, to trust that clarity can come later, that understanding can develop over time, that you don't need to know everything right now. This is one of the hardest things to learn. To rest without resolution, to sleep without answers, to be at peace while things are still uncertain. But it's also one of the most important things, because life is uncertain, often, maybe most of the time. And if you can only rest when everything is clear, you'll rarely rest at all. You'll spend your life exhausted, waiting for a certainty that rarely arrives before you need to sleep. But you can make a different choice. You can choose to rest anyway, in the uncertainty, in the not knowing. You can say, I don't understand this. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have answers, and I'm going to rest anyway. Because my body needs rest regardless of whether my mind has clarity. Because restoration doesn't require understanding. Healing doesn't require certainty. Rest doesn't require resolution. It just requires permission. Permission to let go even though you haven't figured it out yet. Permission to close your eyes even though questions remain. Permission to rest in the middle of uncertainty instead of waiting for it to resolve. And when you give yourself that permission, something shifts. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. The urgency eases. The need to know right now loosens its grip. The possibility of peace without answers becomes real. And your body, finally given permission to rest without conditions, begins to do what it's been trying to do all along. It begins to restore, to regulate, to heal. Not because you figured anything out, but because you finally stopped requiring that you figure it out before you could rest. Tonight, you don't need to know. You don't need to understand. You don't need certainty before you can close your eyes. You can rest in the uncertainty, in the not knowing, in the middle of the confusion. Your body knows how to rest without answers. It's done it before. It will do it again tonight. If you let it. If you stop requiring clarity as the price of peace. Rest comes first. Clarity follows. Always in that order. Never the reverse. You're trying to make the feeling go away. Pushing against it. Reasoning with it. Trying to understand it so you can eliminate it. You're treating it like an intruder. Something that shouldn't be here. Something that needs to be removed before you can be okay. But what if you're wrong? What if the feeling doesn't need to go away before you can rest? What if it can just be there? And you can rest anyway. This idea probably feels impossible right now. How can you rest while feeling this way? How can you be at peace while uncomfortable? But you're conflating two different things. The feeling and your resistance to the feeling. The feeling itself, the discomfort, the sense of being off, the unease that has a certain weight. But your resistance to it, your efforts to push it away, your frustration that it's here, your insistence that you can't rest until it's gone, that has weight too. Often more weight than the original feeling. So what you're actually carrying right now isn't just the discomfort. It's the discomfort plus your fight against the discomfort. And that fight is exhausting. It's taking energy you don't have. It's adding tension on top of tension. But you can stop fighting. You can stop trying to make it go away. Not because you're giving up, but because you're recognizing that the fight isn't helping. It's making things harder. And there's another option, one that requires less energy, less effort, less struggle. You can just let it be there. Not welcome it, not embrace it, not pretend you like it. Just allow it, acknowledge it, make space for it, the way you might make space for rain. You don't like that it's raining. You'd prefer sun. But the rain is here anyway, and you have a choice. You can stand in the rain getting angry that it's raining, demanding that it stop fighting against the reality of water falling from the sky. Or you can acknowledge it's raining. I don't like it. And it's raining anyway. And I can find shelter and wait for it to pass. You don't have to like the rain for this approach to work. You just have to stop fighting the fact that it's raining. The feeling you're experiencing right now is rain. Internal weather. Something that's here whether you want it or not. And you can fight it. You can resist it. You can demand that it stop before you allow yourself to rest. Or you can let it be here. Let it exist. Let it move through you without needing to understand it or eliminate it or make it make sense. Just, it's here. I feel it. I don't like it. And it's here anyway. That's all. That's the whole practice. Not acceptance in the sense of approval, just acceptance in the sense of acknowledgement. This is what's happening right now. This is what I'm feeling. I don't need to change it. I just need to allow it to be what it is. And here's what often happens. When you do this, the feeling softens. Not because you're trying to make it soften, but because you're no longer adding resistance to it. You're no longer piling tension on top of discomfort. You're no longer fighting against what's already here. And without that fight, the original feeling is lighter than you thought, more bearable than it seemed. The unbearable part was the resistance, the fighting, the insistence that this shouldn't be happening. But when you stop insisting, when you just let it be, it's still uncomfortable. But it's not unbearable. It's just a feeling, just a sensation, just a temporary state moving through a temporary moment. And you can be here with it. You can breathe with it. You can can rest alongside it. Not happily, not contentedly, but you can rest. Because rest doesn't require the absence of discomfort. Rest just requires the absence of fighting. Think about physical pain. When you have a headache, you can't make it go away through sheer force of will. But you can lie down anyway. You can close your eyes anyway. You can rest even though the headache is still there. And often in that rest, the headache eases. Not because you tried to make it ease, but because you stopped adding tension to it. Emotional discomfort works the same way. You can't force it to go away, but you can stop fighting it. You can let it be here, let it exist, let it move at its own pace without demanding that it hurry up and leave. And in that allowing, often it does leave, gradually, quietly, in its own time. Not because you pushed it away, but because you stopped holding onto it through resistance. Tonight, you don't need to make this feeling go away. You don't need to understand it. You don't need to fix it. You just need to let it be here, to acknowledge that it's here, to stop fighting the fact that it's here. It's uncomfortable. You don't like it. You wish it weren't here. All of that can be true, and it can still be here. And you can still rest. These things can coexist. The feeling doesn't have to leave before you can have peace. It just has to stop being treated like an enemy. Because it's not an enemy. It's just a feeling. Just your body communicating something. Just a temporary state passing through. And when you treat it that way, as something temporary, something passing, something that doesn't need to be eliminated before you can rest, it becomes lighter, more manageable, less overwhelming, not gone, but bearable, which is all you need tonight. You don't need the feeling to be gone. You just need it to be bearable. And it is, when you stop fighting it. So tonight you can stop trying to make it go away. You can stop pushing against it. You can just let it be here, uncomfortable, unwelcome, but here. And you can rest anyway, alongside it, with it. Not because you like it, just because you're no longer fighting it. And that's enough. That's always been enough. Letting it be there. That's the whole practice. That's all you need to do. This is not who you are. This feeling, this sense of being off, this discomfort, this heaviness, it's not your identity. It's not your permanent condition. It's a state, a temporary state, something you're moving through, not something you are. But it doesn't feel that way right now. Right now it feels permanent. Feels like this is just how things are now, how you are now, how you'll always be. When you're fully immersed in a difficult state, when you've been in it long enough, you start to forget what it's like to feel any other way. You start to believe that this is just reality now. This is your life. This is you. But it's not. It's never been. It never will be. You are not this state. You're a person experiencing this state, moving through this state. And states change, always, without exception. You've been in other difficult states before, and they felt permanent too. They felt like maybe this time you'd always feel that way, but you didn't. The state changed, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. But it changed, and you emerged on the other side, still you, still whole, still capable of feeling differently. This time is no different. This state will change too, because states always do. They're temporary by definition. They arise, they persist, they fade. That's what makes them states and not permanent conditions. Your fundamental self, the awareness that's experiencing all of this, that's constant, that's you. But the states you move through, those are weather. They change, they shift. They're never permanent. Even states that last for months or years eventually shift, eventually change, eventually give way to something else. This is not optimism. This is not hope. This is just physics, just the nature of how systems work. All systems move through states. None stay fixed in one configuration forever. Your body changes states throughout the day. Sleeping, waking, eating, moving, all different states. Your mind changes states constantly. Focused, distracted, calm, activated, shifting every few minutes. Your emotions change states even more frequently. Happy, sad, anxious, peaceful, flowing and changing constantly. And this larger state you're in right now, this feeling of being off, it's no different. It's a state. And like all states, it's temporary. It will change, not might change, will change. Because change is the only constant in living systems. You can't stay in any state forever, even if you wanted to. Even if you tried, the system won't allow it. It's designed to move, to shift, to transition from one state to another, always. So this state you're in, as solid as it feels, as permanent as it seems, it's already changing. Right now, in this moment, slowly, imperceptibly, but changing nonetheless. The molecules in your body are different than they were an hour ago. The neural patterns in your brain have shifted. The chemical balance in your system is in flux. Nothing is static. Everything is moving, including you, including this state. And eventually, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month, you'll notice. You'll realize you feel different. Not because you did anything heroic, not because you figured anything out, but because the state changed, the way states always do, the way they always have, the way they always will. And when that happens, you'll look back at tonight and remember, oh, that's right. That was temporary, just like all the other times, just like every other difficult state I've ever been in. It felt permanent, but it wasn't. This is not your life. This is a moment in your life, a period, a phase, a state, and states pass. They always do, without exception. You don't have to believe this right now. You don't have to feel it. You just have to know it. Know it the way you know the sun will rise tomorrow, even though you can't see it right now. Know it the way you know seasons change, even when winter feels endless. Know it not as hope, but as fact, as the nature of how things work. This state is temporary. This feeling is temporary. This difficulty is temporary. Not because you're making it temporary, not because you're forcing it to end, but because temporary is what it is, by nature, by definition, by the fundamental laws of how living systems operate. You are not this state. You're the awareness experiencing this state. And awareness doesn't change. Only the states do. Only the weather does. And right now, you're in difficult weather. But weather always changes, always passes, always gives way to something else. This will too. Not because you're hoping it will, but because that's what temporary states do. They pass. Always. Without fail. Every single time. There's a pressure you're carrying tonight that doesn't belong to you. The pressure to be ready, to have everything figured out before morning comes. You're lying here thinking you can't sleep until you're prepared for tomorrow, until you have a plan, until you know exactly how you'll handle what's coming. But tomorrow doesn't need you to be ready. Tomorrow will arrive whether you're prepared or not. It always does. Every single morning of your life, tomorrow has come, regardless of how ready you felt the night before. And you've handled it. Every time. Ready or not. Sometimes well, sometimes barely, sometimes with grace, sometimes just surviving. But you've done it. Always. Without fail. Not because you were perfectly ready. But because tomorrow doesn't wait for readiness, it just arrives. And when it does, you respond. You figure it out. You do what needs doing. This is how everyone lives. Not from perfect readiness, but from meeting what comes as it comes. Think about all the things you've worried about before they happened. All the nights spent anxious about tomorrow. How many of those tomorrows turned out the way you feared? Probably very few. Most of the time, tomorrow is just another day, another collection of moments. And you meet those moments the same way you've always met them, by showing up, by doing your best with what you have. Your best doesn't require perfect preparation. It just requires presence, willingness, basic capacity to respond. And you have that. You've always had that. You'll have it tomorrow too. Even if tonight you feel unready, even if you can't imagine facing another day, you will, because you always do. Right now, you're measuring tomorrow's demands against tonight's capacity, and the gap feels insurmountable. How can you possibly handle tomorrow when you feel like this? But you won't face tomorrow from this state. You'll face it from tomorrow's state. After rest, after sleep, after your system has had time to restore some of what's depleted. You won't feel exactly like you do right now. You'll feel different, maybe only slightly, but different. And from that different state, tomorrow will look different too. More manageable, more possible. You don't need tomorrow to be easy. You just need it to be possible. And it will be. You've faced impossible feeling days before, days when you were sure you couldn't do it, and you did it anyway. Not because you were ready, but because the day arrived and you met it, one moment at a time, one task at a time, one breath at a time. Tomorrow will be the same. It will arrive, and you'll meet it, ready or not. So you can release this burden tonight, this pressure to be ready, to have it all figured out. Tomorrow doesn't need that from you. Tomorrow just needs you to rest, so that when it arrives, you have something to meet it with. Not perfect readiness, just basic presence. And rest creates that. Not planning, not preparing, not lying awake trying to get ready. Just rest, just sleep, just allowing your system to restore. That's all tomorrow needs from you tonight. So let go of the pressure to be prepared. Tomorrow will come ready or not, and you'll handle it ready or not, the same way you've handled every other tomorrow, by showing up, by doing what you can. Rest now. Tomorrow will take care of itself. You think you need to understand before you can have peace, that you need to figure out why you feel this way before you can rest. That peace is something you arrive at after understanding, a reward for solving the puzzle. But that's backwards. Peace doesn't wait for understanding. Peace comes when you stop demanding it, when you stop insisting that you need to know why before you can rest. Peace is not the reward for understanding. Peace is what makes understanding possible, because understanding requires a quiet mind, a settled nervous system, and you can't access that while frantically searching for answers, while demanding explanations. That desperate seeking creates noise, tension, the opposite of the conditions needed for clarity. So if you wait for understanding before allowing peace, understanding can never arrive. But when you reverse the order, something shifts. When you allow peace first, when you rest without understanding, you create space where clarity can emerge. Think about a pond. When the water is constantly disturbed, you can't see the bottom. Everything is murky. But when it becomes still, the sediment settles, and clarity appears. Not because you did anything to create it, but because you stopped disturbing it. Your mind works the same way. When constantly active, constantly seeking, everything is cloudy. But when it becomes still, things settle. And sometimes understanding emerges. Or sometimes it doesn't. And you're okay either way. Because you've discovered something more important. That you can be at peace without understanding. That peace is not conditional on having answers. That you can rest in not knowing. This is one of the most liberating discoveries you can make. That peace is available right now, not after you've figured it out, not after you've solved the problem, right now. In the middle of confusion, in the absence of answers, peace is always available. It's just usually obscured by your insistence that you can't have it until you understand. But that insistence is optional. You can let it go. You can say, I don't understand this. I don't have answers. And I'm going to be at peace anyway. Not because I've figured it out, but because peace doesn't require that. This feels risky, like giving up, like surrendering. But it's not. It's accepting reality. That understanding comes in its own time. And while you wait, you might as well be at peace. Because turmoil doesn't make understanding arrive faster. It just makes you exhausted. More incapable of seeing clearly when clarity does arrive. Tonight, you probably feel far from peace. Like peace will come later after you've figured this out. But what if peace is available now? What if you can simply stop fighting? Stop demanding answers. What if you can just let go? Allow things to be unclear. Rest in the not knowing. Not forever. Just for tonight. Just long enough to let your system settle. And from that settled place, maybe understanding will come. Or maybe it won't. Either way, you'll be more resourced to meet whatever comes. Because you chose peace first. Tonight, you can choose peace before understanding. You can rest without answers, not because you've given up on understanding, but because peace comes first, always. Understanding, if it comes at all, comes from peace. So rest now, be at peace now, without understanding. Peace first, everything else later. You've been moving for a long time, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, in every way, going, doing, managing, handling, keeping things together, day after day, always the next thing, always the next responsibility. And somewhere in all that moving, you forgot something fundamental. You forgot that you're allowed to pause. That forward motion is not mandatory. That stopping is an option, always. Even now, you're allowed to pause. Not forever. Just pause. Stop. Rest. Not because everything is done. Not because you've earned it. Just because you need it. Because humans need to pause sometimes. But we've been taught to see pausing as weakness, as giving up. We've been taught that virtue is keeping going, pushing through, never stopping until finished. But everything is never finished. There's always more. If you wait until everything is done before you pause, you'll never pause at all. You'll just keep going until you break, until your body forces you to stop. But you can make a different choice. You can choose to pause before breaking. You can say, I'm pausing now, not because I'm done, but because I need to. This feels radical. It feels wrong. Like abandoning responsibility. But you're not abandoning anything. You're just pausing, temporarily stopping. Everything will still be there when you resume. The tasks, the responsibilities, they'll wait. They always do. But you need to pause. You need to stop moving long enough to remember what stillness feels like. to remember that you're not just a productivity machine. You're a person who needs rest. And rest is not something you squeeze in between tasks. It's not optional. Rest is foundational, what makes everything else possible. Without it, everything deteriorates. Your decisions, your capacity, your presence. You can keep going on empty for a while, but eventually the emptiness shows. So pausing is not irresponsible. Pausing is what prevents everything from falling apart. But it requires permission, that you override the voice that says you can't stop. That voice is lying. The truth is, you're allowed to pause. Anytime. For any reason. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to earn it. You can just pause. Right now. Tonight. Think about your breath. Inhale. Exhale. And between them, a pause. A natural moment of stillness. You don't skip it. You don't rush through it. It's just there. Part of the rhythm. Essential. Your life needs the same pauses. Natural moments of stillness between the doing. Without them, you suffocate. The pause is not optional. It's essential. And right now, you need to pause. Not because you're weak, not because you're failing, but because you've been moving for so long. And movement requires pauses. So tonight, give yourself permission. Permission to stop, to pause, to just be. Without doing, without fixing, without progressing, just being, just breathing, just resting. Not because everything is done, but because you're allowed to pause even when it's not. The world will keep turning. Everything you're worried about will wait. But you need to pause now. So pause. Stop moving. Just for tonight. You're allowed. You've always been allowed. Everything will still be there tomorrow. But tonight, you pause. You rest. You stop. Not because you're done, but because you're human. And humans are allowed to pause. This is the truth you've been resisting all night. You don't have to feel okay before you can rest. You don't have to fix everything before you can sleep. You can rest right now, exactly as you are, feeling exactly how you feel. Off, uncertain, uncomfortable, unclear. You can rest anyway, not because you've resolved anything, not because you've figured anything out, but because rest doesn't require those things. Rest is available to you right now, in this state. With these feelings, you can rest while things feel wrong, sleep while confused, have peace while uncomfortable. These things are not mutually exclusive. They never have been. You just thought they were. You thought you needed to fix the feeling before you could rest. Understand the confusion before you could sleep. Make everything okay before you could have peace. But you were wrong. You didn't know that rest is unconditional, that it doesn't require perfect conditions, that it's available even in difficulty. Now you know. Now you can choose differently. You can choose to rest even though everything still feels off. Even though nothing has been resolved. You can close your eyes right now. Let your body settle. Let your breath slow. Not because everything is fine, but because everything doesn't need to be fine for you to rest. You can rest in the middle of wrong, in the center of confusion, in the heart of not knowing. You can rest because rest is what you need, not what you've earned, just what you need. Right now, as a human being who's been going for too long. And tonight, that need is enough. You don't need to be okay to rest. You just need to rest. And you can. With everything still feeling off. With nothing resolved. With all the uncertainty still there. You can rest anyway. Sleep anyway. Have peace anyway. Because peace is not the absence of difficulty. Peace is the choice to rest in the middle of difficulty. And tonight, You can make that choice. You can let go. Let everything be exactly as it is. Let the feeling be here. Let the confusion be here. And rest anyway, not because you've changed anything, but because you've stopped requiring that things change before you can rest. You've stopped making rest conditional on feeling okay. And in that stopping, rest becomes possible. You can rest, you can sleep, you can close your eyes and let go, not because you've fixed anything, but because you don't need to. Not tonight. Tonight you can rest while things feel off, and that's not giving up. That's not failing. That's wisdom. That's choosing rest over struggle, peace over understanding, sleep over resolution. And in that choosing, you're allowing what your body has been asking for all along. Rest. Real rest. The kind that doesn't require anything from you except permission. And you have that permission. You've always had it. You just didn't know. Now you do. So rest, sleep, let go. Everything else can wait. Everything else will wait. But you can rest now, exactly as you are, feeling exactly how you feel. Off, uncertain, tired, all of it. Rest now, sleep now, peace now. Nothing more required, nothing more needed. Just rest, just sleep, just let go. You don't have to feel aligned. You don't have to feel ready. You only have to rest. Tonight has been long and heavy, and you've carried so much through it. But now, you can let it all be. The feeling of off, the uncertainty, the questions without answers. All of it can stay exactly where it is. And you can rest anyway. Not because you've solved anything, not because you've earned it, just because rest is always available, always waiting, always here, for you, exactly as you are, off, tired, confused, uncertain. All of it, every part of you, can rest now. Your body knows how. It's always known. Your breath slows, your muscles soften, your mind quiets, not because you're trying, just because you're allowing the night to hold you, allowing rest to find you, allowing everything to be exactly as it is, unresolved, unclear, unfinished, and resting anyway, because you don't have to feel okay to rest. You never did. You only have to be here, breathing, letting go. Tomorrow will come. It always does. And you'll meet it. You always have. But tonight is for rest, for softening, for release, for letting everything be exactly as it is. While you sleep, deep, quiet, peaceful sleep, nothing more needed, nothing more required. Just this, just breath, just rest, just let go.